Before we announce and let everybody introduce themselves, I'm actually going to recognize the president of a great institution in South Georgia. Of course, a lot of us went there and it educated us well, as you can tell. But I'm going to recognize Dr. Bridges, David Bridges, if you want to get up and give some opening remarks.
I'll try to be up here to be no one's back. Welcome, and Jay, thank you for choosing to host this meeting here at Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College. We're pleased to have you here. First of all, let me say if there's anything we can do during your visit today to help you, let us know. Anything last minute comes up or problems, please let us know. I would make a smart remark about Jay's education, except the fact that I'm an alumnus as well. And so if I made fun of him, I'd be making fun of myself and many others in the room, so I guess I probably shouldn't do that. But we are pleased to have you here. We are in our 106th year as an institution, and we are early in the fall semester. Things are very busy, very active. We are very fortunate to once again have had an enrollment increase. That is not something that has been common the last 2 or 3 years, particularly in the southern half of the state, the rural part of the state. But we have been blessed once again with an enrollment increase. Maybe more importantly is that we've been blessed with the right kind of enrollment increase. Our enrollment in baccalaureate programs grew 23% this year. We started our first bachelor's degree offerings at ABAT in January of 2008 with 41 students. We opened our session on the 13th of August this year with almost 1,200 baccalaureate degree seeking students at the institution. So in just 5.5 years, we've gone to a point where 1/3 of our total enrollment is studying in bachelor's programs. And that is a great stabilizing factor for us during a period of time when enrollment is typically declining. Our enrollment has stabilized and continues to grow because we're able to retain students here for the 3rd and 4th year study. And I will close my remarks by saying that it is that group of students that has the greatest economic impact on the region. When you're a 2-year college, people come and go rather quickly. We're all familiar with first-year attrition rates. For a variety of reasons, students come out of high school and go to college, and either college figures out it wasn't for them or the student figures out college was not for them and they leave. But once you get into a situation where 1/3 of your enrollment is in bachelor's programs, you have the potential to retain those students. And as those students stay here in Tifton for that 3rd and 4th year study, they tend to move off campus, they tend to rent apartments, rent houses, spend more money. Some of them find spouses, some of them find jobs, and tend to hang around and have maximum economic impact. So I want to thank y'all again for being here. I hope you enjoyed your drive in, and in particularly that last quarter mile that you made from Georgia US 41, the interstate, over to the college after, let's see what, Jay, 35 years, we got it 4-lane. It was originally destined to be a divided highway back in the 80s when the interstate changes were changed. And with the great help of Transportation State of Georgia and the City of Tifton, we were able to partner and get that road 4 lanes in, and it has had a really positive impact on not only on us, but on the University of Georgia's Conference Center and other facilities. Thank y'all for being here. Jay, thank you for giving us an opportunity to host you. And if we can do anything, let Pam know. She'll be around for a while. And Scott Blunt will be your designated assistant. I know many of you know Scott. He's right there. He works for us now. And Scott will help you through the day if you have needs.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bridges. Well, I can see some of our metro legislators and all that and didn't make it down to South Georgia.
I didn't have any trouble.
And you're above. You're not a metro. You're not a metro. We got it. I said some. I said some. Actually, no, we've got batteries from up there as well.
I forgot to say welcome to South Georgia.
There you go.
I did. I don't usually forget to do that, but I did forget. So welcome to South Georgia. That is a separate country sometimes.
We wanted them to experience what we experience all the time, driving back up north. But first of all, let me say thank you, each and every one of you, for coming out today. This is an important issue that we believe that needs to be addressed. I think you can, if you've looked at the schedule, you can see that it is a meeting that's going to take place all across the state of Georgia. We got 8 different meetings, and we're trying to be within 2 hours of anybody that wants to be able to attend, to be able to attend. So with that being said, we're going to start off down to the right and let everybody that's here today on the committee introduce themselves so y'all will know where each and every one of them's from and who they represent. Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Michael Sullivan. I'm president of the American Council of Engineering Companies of Georgia. I'm also chairman of the Georgia Transportation Alliance, and in that role I'm sitting here by designation in place of Chris Clark, the president and CEO of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce.
Good morning. I'm Clint Mueller. I'm the legislative director for the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia, ACCG. I'm sitting here for Ross King, who's unable to be here today. He's our executive director. Also good to be back in Southwest Georgia, where I grew up.
Brandon Beach, Senate District 21, which is North Fulton and Cherokee County, Alpharetta, Milton, and all of Cherokee. Been on the DOT board. I see some of my former DOT board members. I serve on the Transportation Committee, and glad to be on this committee.
Good morning. I'm Steve Gooch from Dahlonega. The 51st District covers about 8 counties all the way up to the state line. So it's good to be in South Georgia for the day, and look forward to some good continuing conversation about transportation.
And he's the co-chairman of the study committee. He is my senator.
I'm here to keep Jay on schedule.
He does a good job of that. He is my cohort over in the Senate as well. Jay Roberts, most of you from around here know who I am. I represent Irwin, Ben Hill, Turner, a good portion of Tift, and part of Coffee County. And whenever we started talking about having the meetings around the state, I said, well, we're going to have one down in South Georgia, at least on the campus of ABAC, because we want to showcase our little gem here of South Georgia. Somebody said earlier today, why are you wearing blue jeans and boots? I said, well, I'm going back to ABAC. That's what I wore when I was here, blue jeans and boots. So thank y'all, though, for coming.
I am Tyler Harper, and I represent the 7th Senate District, which is 10 counties in southeast Georgia. Runs basically from right here where we're at all the way over to Charlton County. But it is a pleasure to be here, and glad we brought it down to South Georgia into this fine institution of which I'm an alumni as well. So looking forward to the meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Hi, I'm Hala Modelmuck, President and CEO of the Metro Atlanta Chamber, and I, too, am glad to be in South Georgia. That's great. I love it. And just very pleased to be a part of this very important study committee, so thank you for having us.
I'm Steve Green. I'm from Savannah, Georgia, but I'm happy to be down in South Georgia. We claim that, and this is God's country. But I am the citizen appointee by Lieutenant Governor Cagle. I'm a 3-time chairman of the Georgia Port Authority, and last year as the chairman of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. So I'm happy to be a part of this and look forward to hearing all your comments today. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Valerie Clark from Gwinnett County, where people dream about transportation. And Mr. President, I have a graduate who was an agriculture major from Athens, and so pleased to be there. And I would like to say I had the nicest trip here, passing cotton fields and a trailer full of horses, and it was just lovely. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here today.
I'm Representative Mark Hamilton, 24th District up in north of Atlanta. I just got here from Kentucky. And by the way, some of your students don't know where this building is because we asked 6 different people and nobody knew where. I'm anxious to find out what's in Bowen Hall because nobody on the campus knows where it's at. So thank you very much.
And good morning. I'm Bobby Epps, House District 144, which is in the middle of our state. 7 counties in and around the Macon and Middle Georgia area, and I joined Valerie as members of this committee ex officio with the House Transportation Committee, and it's an honor to be here, and it's good to see Dr. Bridges and experience the hospitality that he always extends at ABAC, and encouraged to see this turnout of interested parties in our transportation. Thank you.
I also want to recognize, of course, he gave our prayer, but Representative Ellis Black, soon to be Senator Ellis Black. We don't know why he wanted to leave and go over to the dark side, but he chose to. He has to pay. We're glad to have him today. Sam Watson, Representative Sam Watson from Moultrie, who has part of Tift County as well. Am I missing any other? Representative Houston was here, but she had to leave. And Greg Kirk, who is Senator-elect, that'll have part of, well, he has all of Tift County, actually, and he's from up in America, so we welcome him. We were in a couple meetings with him this morning, and I asked him, I said, have you regretted your decision now? So he kind of got a little baptism this morning in what it's about. So with that being said, we're going to now recognize a guy that's no stranger, a former member of the House, to also welcome us here. He is a DOT board member and has done an outstanding job. Mr. Johnny Floyd to welcome us here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, it's real good to have you here in Tifton in South Georgia. We realize that a lot of you are not familiar with these little bugs that's flying around, but we in South Georgia have learned to blow and cooperate with those little gnats. But we're glad to have this committee in South Georgia and to understand and for people to come in and to hear what is said about the Department of Transportation. It's important for the economic development of this state, and we want to do our part in trying to move Georgia forward. And thank all of you for coming out.
Jay Shaw, who is a former member of the House as well, he is here and actually has been the chairman of the board and has just rotated off as chairman. We'll recognize him for just a second.
I don't believe we're going to have a meeting time we get to recognize him. Thank you very much. Jay, Mr. President, he stepped out. I was at ABAC before them. I was at ABAC when it was a 4-year school. In fact, my father thought it was a 4-year school. And I never told him any different. But we got Senator Beach and Senator Goose. They serve with us on the DOT board. And for those of you that don't know our commissioner, Keith, stand up. This is Keith Golden. He is a 26-year, 27-year veteran of the Department of Transportation. He's a double graduate at Georgia Tech with his bachelor's in civil engineering and his master's. We had a former commissioner here, Vance Smith. Most all of us are former something. But I enjoyed my 18 years in the House, and good to see you, Senator Cross, back there. You did a great job. I hope you enjoy your retirement. Thank you very much. But thank y'all for having us. And Senator Goose, now you can see what it's like to go from one end of the state to the other. You've got another 50 miles. But we do that, we do it every Sunday afternoon and Friday afternoon. But we're glad to have y'all in South Georgia. Jim Tudor's the reason I gained 50 pounds in the legislature. Because he run the anteroom and he kept all of us fed. And I couldn't walk by those donuts every morning without getting one. Now I'm diabetic.
And Jay kind of introduced the commissioner, but also introduced the man that I was going to wait till right before we started calling the rest of them up this morning. Judge Crosby, and we people like to call him Senator from up and around Atlanta, but all of us know him as Judge. He was our judge for a number of years, and to be honest with you, he is going to be a man that's going to be sorely missed. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If we all had the attitude that he had in Atlanta, it would be a better place. And he is truly a statesman, and he has been a servant of the people for several decades now. And Judge, we're going to miss you. And if you would like to say a few words, we actually want to give you that opportunity as well, because I know you have deserved it.
Just a quick hello and good morning and welcome to Tifton. I think the greatest thing about serving in the legislature and working for the state is you have the opportunity to meet so many people and make so many friends. And I see many, many friends here today. And good luck and God bless you. Thank you for all you do for the state of Georgia.
Thank you, Judge. All right, with that being said, we'll get into our guest speakers to start off with. And I would ask, if you will, to go to the podium up front. Mr. Lowell Clary from Florida. Is he here? Okay. We can mark that one off the list. That's pretty good. Moving right along. Mr. Chris Hardy from the Albany Chamber. Well, now, did he not be able to find his way from Albany? They may be coming in the afternoon then. We may get through quick today, fellas. Is the Valdosta Chamber represented here? Yes, sir. All right. Ernie, you get to come up, and we'll let you kick everything off. Mr. Ballard, you can get up to the podium there.
Well, it's nothing like getting to go first, because I don't know what I'm doing. So if I'd got somebody else, I'd have been able to follow their lead. But I'm Bruce Allred, and I'm representing the Valdosta Chamber. We are very concerned about what's going to happen in Georgia with transportation, and that's one of the reasons that we're here today. You know, T-SPLOS failed for us, and we've got to have an alternative. Obviously, what we're going to talk about today is not something we're going to do tomorrow. It's going to be something we're going to do 10 years down the road. But we've got to plan it now. We've got to figure out how we're going to pay for it now. And we're very interested in hearing all the opinions today and let you know that we are firmly behind and support whatever it's going to take to make sure that Georgia stays at the forefront in transportation. We have got to have good roads to have a good future. Thank you.
Yeah, hold on 1 second, if you don't mind. Chairman.
We're going to burn some time. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Tell me what your top 2 or 3 priorities would be in this area of the state for transportation investment. If somebody came to you and said, here's an extra whatever number of dollars, what would you do with it?
Well, one of the things that I'd like to be sure that we have is that, you know, we make sure that our interstate and all those associated roads are in good shape. You know, they've got to be, we've got to get that interstate finished. We've got to have those feeder roads finished. And then we've got to look at the communities that they serve. The communities right on the interstate are really better off. But you get 20 miles off of it, those people need help too. And so we've got to make sure we've got infrastructure that's connecting those roads. A lot of people in our area are farmers. They've got to have good roads to get their product to the market. So we've got to make sure that infrastructure exists for them. So that's probably what I would look at, is those particular issues that are affecting them, especially in very real South Georgia, that is going to make their life easier and make them more economically viable.
And I apologize if any of your county commissioners or city elected officials are here. I don't know. I think I saw one earlier come in, but I'm not asking you to speak for them. But would you say the issue isn't as much congestion relief as it is maintenance of your secondary roads, county roads, and maybe gravel roads? Or what do you? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to learn. Because when I came in this morning, I drove almost from the state line from Dahlonega. I drove through Atlanta to here. And I had to leave at 5 a.m. to avoid the rush hour. Once I got through Atlanta, it was clear sailing all the way. So I didn't see the congestion that I would have expected when I got to Macon. There was very little.
Congestion is typically only a problem on holiday weekends and stuff like that in our area. So what we're talking about, I believe, is like I said, it's repair and maintenance of existing roads, making sure that what we have is viable and usable in the future, and not, again, we're talking 10 years down the road. I think that's what we've got to look at. We've got to look at these, not necessarily major arteries, but the minor ones, and how we're going to connect all those so everybody can get to market.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our speaker? Thank you. And a lot of times we talk about transportation and two Georgias and all, and I think when it actually comes to transportation, you almost have to look at it as two Georgias. I mean, we realize and understand that in the metropolitan area, it's all about congestion relief. It's about getting a person from point A to point B in a reasonable amount of time. But down in South Georgia or rural Georgia, not only here but in the other parts of the state, this rural, it's about economic development. It's about being able to get a product from point A to point B. It's about being able to create jobs and bring in business and industries and let them understand that if they come and build here, that we will have the infrastructure that they need in order to get that product from either here to the port or from here to the rail or wherever they need to go, but we'll have that infrastructure. And that's one of the things that we want to discuss and we want to talk about. As we've said, nothing's off the table. We want to hear from everybody with all of your ideas that you might have, because this is something that we want to look at, not from a 2-year to 5-year, but 10 to 20 years, 30 years down the road is what we're looking at, trying to develop a plan that will help to hopefully solve this issue that we're faced with right now. We don't want to have to deal with it again in a couple of years, so we're looking for a long-term plan. And with that, I'm going to recognize Senator Lucas, if you will, who has just stepped in. Now, let everybody know where you're from, Senator.
I'm from Macon, Georgia, and I represent half of Bibb, part of Houston, part of Jones, all of Twiggs, all of Wilkerson, all of Hancock, and all of Washington County.
Thank you, Senator. All right. We're going to move along, and I got a message a while ago that a couple of them thought that they were supposed to talk after lunch. I'm getting more messages. We will let them speak after lunch when they get here. There was some confusion. But with that being said, I'm going to now call on one of my constituents and one of Senator Harper's constituents and also a good friend of mine, Scott Downing. If you will come forward. He is the Transportation Committee Vice Chair for ACCG this year. Scott, we appreciate you and thank you for coming today.
Well, guys, I appreciate you putting me on the agenda. My name is Scott Downing. I'm a Ben Hill County Commissioner, and I'm also the Vice Chair of the ACCG Policy Committee for Transportation and Economic Development. I don't really think those two things are mutually exclusive. Matter of fact, one begets the other. So I won't bore you guys with telling you all about our policy platform because we've streamlined it in the last few years and made it real easy for you to read. So when you get back to your office at the Capitol, I'm sure you'll have a nice, thin little outline of where we stand on policy. But I will tell you a little bit about our committee meetings over the summer. We've had some subcommittee meetings, and our membership has taken this issue very serious. Matter of fact, I think our committee chairs and vice chairs and policy members feel like this is probably the most important issue that we'll face this session. And right along with that, the economic development, which is our committee too. So those are the two most important things, and we're looking forward to tackling this year. From a Ben Hill County standpoint, I can tell you our issues are about maintenance. Taxpayers have put money into our roads and our bridges, and we're not doing too good a job of maintaining those. Without pointing finger, because I don't think there is a blame, but we used to be the commissioners of the roads, and as we got away from, as DOT picked up more of that responsibility, we got away from funding that, and now we don't have the funding mechanisms. It's very important for us as small communities to have the arteries to allow truck traffic. We feel like the ports are going to be a huge part of our future. We need access to get truck traffic to and from those without killing our citizens on the roads. We've got a few projects that's been in the works for 20 years and probably not going to get funded in my lifetime. And not that that's the most important issue, but it is an important issue for us, economic development. I tell some of you guys, when you talk to me outside of these meetings, I tell you guys can help us out or feed us, because if we don't have a means to bring economies of scale to South Georgia, then we're going to be starving. We've got a lot of agricultural stuff that needs to get out of here, needs to get on those ships in Savannah. We need to be able to run this rail through these communities, and we need to make it where these communities can live with the rail. We have a train every 15 minutes coming through Fitzgerald, Georgia. Put that through your head just a second. A train every 15 minutes. CSX tells me they can't get one more train on that line. So we're having to build spurs. We're having to go to places that we didn't think we were going to have to go. We had to purchase up property on the main line that they now will not serve. So we have to purchase property on rail that's what's considered dormant. That means we're going to need transportation to and from those locations that wasn't planned in the past. So it's an important issue. It's an important issue for us. I know everybody takes it serious. Our leadership at ACCG is on the committee, and we applaud that. I've had the ear of everybody up there, and it's been very receptive. We all want to solve the problem, but for South Georgia, it is a little bit different, but I think it's just as important, and I appreciate your time.
Scott, talk a little bit about the issue like you're facing like locally that from a county standpoint, like with the bridge out at Wiregrass now, and what you were dealing with from that standpoint.
Yeah, well, we have, to give you guys a little bit of background, a county the size of Ben Hill County, we have 18,000 people, and our budget this year will be about $8 million. We have a bridge going to our technical college that right now, legally, the fire truck can't go over to service that place. Not that there's not another route, don't get me wrong, but the fastest route is across a bridge that's no longer certified or legal, and that bridge is going to cost about $1 million to repair. I know that's a drop in the well for some folks, but for us to drum up $1 million is a complicated, difficult task. So that's just one example, Jay. As you know, and when we've talked about them, we've got 2 or 3 other bridges that are like that. This is obviously the most important one. This is the one we put all our eggs in the basket. Ben Hill County's gone out and spent the money to have the engineering done to try to facilitate the moving forward of that project, because we do deem it important. But we've got 3 or 4 other bridges that are in the same situation. And as we move down the road, the deterioration factor in all of our bridges, we all ride these roads. Matter of fact, when I go somewhere, I try to ride a back road. I pay attention to the bridges. You know, a lot of them have the date stamped right on the side of them, don't they? How many of those have a date much later than 1990 on them? You know, most of them don't. Most of them have some early dates on there, 50s and 60s, and some of them even in the 40s. So we know we're getting behind on those, and that's, I will say this, you ride this country, Georgia's got the best roads in the country. It might not be the back roads. I mean, obviously our back roads are deteriorating, but we need to try to find out how we can facilitate that into the future. Our transportation infrastructure here in this state has always been strong. We want to keep it that way. And you know, not to step on you there, Jay, but an important issue for me is our airports. You know, the way people get to these small towns. Well, I can tell you, if a conglomerate from Germany comes into Atlanta and they want to visit sites in Georgia, they're not jumping in a panel van and visiting 8 sites. They're going to get in an airplane and they're going to fly around. And if somebody says, well, your airport's not long enough to come in, they'll say, strike that one off the list. And I could talk about that for a long time, so I won't get on my soapbox about that, but I appreciate you asking the question about my bridge. It's important to us.
Well, I mean, I think that's an issue that a lot of counties and cities face throughout the state. And from our standpoint, looking at funding, when we're trying to, right now we realize that the funding that's coming in is not able to keep up with the current maintenance and operation of the roads that we got. This is one example of it. This bridge has now been out, I think, 4 years. Am I right?
Yes.
About 4 years now where the fire truck's not able to cross it. So, and I mean, there's stories like that all across the state. I mean, the department's doing an outstanding job with the resources they have, but they don't have the resources to be able to go in and repair all those bridges across the state of Georgia. And we talk about bridges, we talk about, you know, school buses cross them and those types of things. I mean, we've had them in our home county where, you know, they've had to go around them for years because they can't afford to replace them, and GDOT doesn't have the money, so we're going way around these bridges and able to get kids to and from school. But that is an issue, and I appreciate the comment about the airports as well. We've talked about that a lot, and we all understand, especially in rural Georgia, an airport has a lot to do with economic development. And so we thank you. Any other questions for Scott? You done pretty good, Scott.
Thanks for your time.
And that's the shortest I've ever heard you speak.
I like to say it. I'm trying to respect your time.
But actually, today we look like we've got plenty. Where is, let's see, where did Ed go? On the very end down there. Ed is the appointee, the citizen appointee by the Speaker. Ed, let them know who you are and where you're from.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Edward Lindsay. I'm a former state representative and former majority whip of the State House. I live in, and I represented Buckhead and Sandy Springs in the State House for 10 years. And I appreciate the opportunity to come back down to Abraham Baldwin.
Thank you. And I still want to say Representative Lindsay, for making it down from the Buckhead area down to God's country today. We're glad to have you.
Granddaddy would have agreed.
Yeah, he sure. It was originally from Wilcox. From Wilcox County, so he's got some South Georgia ties. I have a lot of people that signed up on this sheet. I'm going to open up right now because we've got some that were going to be here to speak before lunch. This evidently got crossed up, and they're not going to be here till after lunch, and that's okay. But we'll open up the open mic right now for any kind of public comment starting now, and then we'll open it again after lunch in case somebody missed out. But Ms. Eva, did you want to speak? Are you sure? Okay. Ellis? I lost my mic. That might be a good thing. Destin. There we go. All right. Well, why don't I do it this way? Who would like to speak instead of trying to go down this list and calling out everybody? Vance. Did you want to speak? Okay, come on. We're giving everybody an opportunity to speak that wants to speak. Understand, we want to hear from everybody. If you would, tell us who you are and either who you're with, or are you just here as a citizen, and that's great too, because we want to hear from everybody.
Well, sometimes I don't know who I am or who I'm with. I'm the Lowndes County Commission Chairman. Panel, I certainly appreciate you doing this, coming across the state. This is extremely important, not just to this region, but it's also extremely important to this state. This is something that, as we all know, I think we've all recognized, that's going to have to be addressed, how we're going to fund transportation, and again, as Scott said, ties all that into economic development for any community. I know for our community in Lowndes County and Valdosta, it is extremely important to us. I mean, there's issues right now that I see from an economic development standpoint. There are things that's just as simple as being able to fund the maintenance, the mowing, the cleaning. These things are of our interest and point of interest into this state, which affects South Georgia and, of course, North as well, but especially the arteries and all around the interstate. So we know we have an issue. We know we have a problem, and I certainly appreciate everyone and their good intentions of addressing this, and let's try to see if we can't find whatever the resources are going to be for us to fund transportation in this state. Because again, we're not a disaster yet, but we're a pending disaster. as Scott said, we have bridges. We're having to spend in Lowndes County a tremendous amount of money just to address our local bridges because of the same issue. We have bridges right now that are beginning to get to the limits to where our school buses can't cross these bridges. We're having to spend tax dollars and SPLOST revenue to do these repairs and these maintenance. Now, we've got a lot of other infrastructure issues in our communities that really that funding locally can be handled with. We need help from a transportation standpoint from the state. The Department of Transportation needs the funding that they need so that they can go out there and do the work across this state rather than pushing the issues back down and forcing local governments to have to take on a bigger and bigger responsibility.
Any questions? I've got a question. Suggestion, and I guess I'm still on. Suggestion. What would you suggest that we do from a state level standpoint to find more revenue or increase the revenue to GDOT in order to try to help?
Well, I think there's several different options out there. We all know it comes down to how are we going to generate the revenue. We know in our part of the state, the opportunity that we have with T-SPLOST failed miserably. I'm not sure if we bring up an issue such as that again, whether we would be successful with it, on the second try or not. So that's a real struggle. But we're going to have to look at some ways to do it, whether we have to do it through increasing the gas tax, changing the way that tax is applied, and those sort of things. There's going to have to be a way, if we've recognized that our State Department of Transportation is short-funded, we're going to have to, as I say, through the state, we're going to have to put our big boy pants on, and we're going to have to decide what we're going to have to do and look at it seriously and go through there and fund whatever we're going to have to do to keep this state in the position that we need to maintain it for it to still be a jewel of the South, and so that we can continue to gain our economic development areas, not just in the metro area, but throughout this state, and take those opportunities. And it's, gentlemen and ladies, it's going to take funding. It's just it. And we're going to have to figure out what is the best way to do that to bring funding to this state.
What is your biggest issue down in Lowndes County from a transportation standpoint? I mean, a lot of people would sit there and look at it and say, you've got an interstate running through. I mean, you're doing good there. You've got a college, university there that is my alumni as well. And I just had a son graduate from there and got a daughter going there. So I spend a lot of tax dollars
and we appreciate
in Lowndes County right now. But I mean, you have a lot of ways to bring in revenue in Lowndes County, but yet y'all are still in a situation where you are struggling to try to be able to find the resources to fund your transportation needs. So what would you say is your biggest issue there?
Well, I think, and I appreciate that, but I think as well as we talked about, where we might be different from a community that might be 10 miles off the interstate, as you said, Interstate 75 runs right through Valdosta. We do have some congestion issues there, and there's some plans and some work that's going to be done on our interchanges there. And, of course, for that to move forward past the planning stages, that's going to take funding to do that. That's extremely important. I personally feel like that from an economic standpoint, that to me, this state, we've got to make this state as attractive as we possibly can from one end of this state to the other. I think our gateways is extremely important. Our neighbors to the south of us in Florida, there's a tremendous amount of difference when you hit that state line at the way just the maintenance and the way those communities and the way those exits and interchanges looks, sadly, compared to the way they look in the state of Georgia today. And I think that that's important, especially in an area such as Lowndes County and Valdosta, where we are the gateway from Florida coming into the state. Those things are going to be extremely important. Again, the bridges, extremely important. If we have to route trucking, if we have to route school buses and those sort of things around around some of these bridges. It's going to be costly, and it's also going to be very expensive, not only to the communities from a maintenance standpoint, but to those industries as well. That ties back into the economic development. If we don't have a community, whether it's Valdosta, Lowndes County, or any other community in this state, if we don't have a community that's easy to move around and get through, then we're going to have problems from an economic development standpoint. Again, that's just another one of those checks that we get checked off when someone's looking at a community for economic development.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Lindsay.
I thank you for coming today, and my area has a little congestion too, so I understand your pain. I got a tough question for you, and I want to preface this by telling you that I voted for T-SPLOS. I supported the T-SPLOS referendum in the metro region, and I got the scars to prove it when it went down hard in my area too. What I'm struggling with is whether we are better off pushing for regions to go back with a better list in their particular areas, such as mine or yours, or are we better off asking, rather simply allowing one or more counties to come together and join a coalition of the willing in their particular area to come up with, in effect, a mini region. And I just would like your perspective on that one way or the other. I'm struggling with it. I wanted it to pass in my area. It failed. You wanted it to pass probably in your area. It failed.
Absolutely.
For both of us, what's our better route based on what you're seeing in your area?
Well, I don't think trying to do it from a regional standpoint is going to be beneficial in the long run to the state as a whole. I think what you're going to find then is patchwork, no different than you have right now, to where we have the area that did pass the T-SPLOS through the belt of the state. Yes, we don't have the resources in the southern part of the state. It seems to be such an issue that's it gets really politically tough, I guess you might say, from the folks that just don't want you to spend the money, don't want you to do anything, just don't want to see the state grow, or not see it grow, but maybe they're just comfortable where we're at. You know, this whole plan that everybody's talking to is not something that, as we've said, is not necessarily what we're going to do today. It's the plans you're making today that's going to take care of us tomorrow. And that's the extreme, that's the thing that we need to do. I think it's going to have to come down to something that's going to be statewide, personally. It's going to have to be something that there's going to have to be some equitable sharing into the communities from the state, so that these local communities also will be able to do some of the things locally that they need to do, as well, with some of their issues that they have. So I think it's a statewide problem.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, one quick follow-up. Regarding Lowndes County, do y'all tax gasoline for anything other than for transportation purposes in your area? For instance, there are certain SPLOS that exist in which
No,
gas is taxed for non-transportation purposes.
No, sir, we don't have anything else.
Thank you.
Let me clarify that.
I want to clarify.
Yeah, let me clarify his question.
Yeah.
Your local sales tax, SPLOS, DLOS, all of that is actually on motor fuel as well.
It is, yes, right. Yeah. That's correct.
Thank you.
And, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
So my follow-up question on that was, of that tax, how much do you currently spend on transportation?
Of that tax right now, we're going to be spending, throughout that 6-year SPLOS plan, we've got in the vicinity of, it's about close to $20 million that we're going to be spending on transportation issues, whether it's road improvements and bridges in our community.
But what percentage of the tax you're collecting is that?
It's about 33% of it.
Okay, so just to clarify, so a third of the money that you pull in on SPLOS?
On SPLOS.
Or the tax on gasoline?
It's on the SPLOS.
On SPLOS.
Okay. You want to ask anybody else got a question? Go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you a question, Commissioner.
You're not off the hot seat yet.
How long have you been a commissioner?
18 months.
18 months. Welcome to politics.
Yes, thank you.
I was a former sole commissioner, so I've been in your shoes. Going back to your T-SPLOST referendum that failed, you said it failed miserably. What do you think the issues were in that? Do you think it was a communication issue, or what? Down in this area of the state, I'm not familiar. I know in my area what people's comments were and around Atlanta, but what do you think the issue was here? They didn't see the need for the extra money, or didn't understand what the plan was?
He's in my region. You want me to answer that?
I think it was really. I think it was a combination. I think you had, as I said, you had some folks out there that pushed their agenda to basically it wouldn't have mattered what kind of tax it was, just no tax. It wouldn't have mattered. I think there's also some folks out there that just felt like that the way it was done from a revenue sharing standpoint, which most of us in Lowndes County, we look at Lowndes County certainly as a regional hub. We love it when we see our other area counties and communities improve. And so I personally, I voted for it and I supported it. I didn't have an issue with it. I felt like that was the best thing that we could do at the time. It was the best thing that was offered up. Now, is that the fix at this point in time? As I've said earlier, I don't think so. Again, that's my opinion.
Hold on, Mayor. You're going to have to go to the podium in a minute. You do have to go to the podium. No, you're going to have to go up there and help him after it.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a different question, if I may,
Okay.
if you're finished with that one. What's the price of a gallon of gas across the state line today in Florida, nearest you?
Across the state line? It's about $3.35.
Okay. And I filled up just a few miles up the road, and it was $3.15.
How much?
$3.15 a gallon?
Yeah, it was this past weekend when I left town and went to Florida, it was $3.25 in Valdosta and $3.35 in Florida.
I filled up in Tennessee at 308.
308 in Tennessee. Just curious. How many people coming out of Florida do you think are non-Georgians? I'm trying to think. How many, and you may not have the answer to this, but I'm just curious. How many people are driving to Florida a year that are coming through Georgia, whether they stop and buy gas here or not? I'm just wondering how many are non-Georgians that are buying gas at our pumps. So I don't know if there's a way for us to.
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, it would be something outside of a guess. Basically, I mean, we looked at just like, for example, on our SPLOST revenue. Of course, we're talking about local community, surrounding areas. That also is that better than 50% of that was coming from folks outside of Lowndes County. We get that. So we have to assume also at the same time that a lot of those folks on Interstate 75 that's coming through, if you're going anywhere from North Georgia into Central Florida, we're a perfect stopover spot. We know that we have some good fortune with our hotels and motels in the evening. I use the analogy that, I start early and end late. I'd go home in the evening and the parking lots would be, in the hotels would be virtually empty. I'd come back in that morning at 5:30 and they're packed and parking on the sidewalks for the most part. So we are very, very fortunate with stopover traffic, if that's what you're talking about, as far as what's coming through the state in Lowndes County.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, I'm just curious, how much of the motor fuel tax actually goes to transportation?
I'm sorry now.
When we're talking about the SPLOST, how much of your motor fuel tax actually goes to transportation? Is it 100% or something less than that?
No, I'm sure it would probably be something less than that, and I don't have that with me, so I couldn't tell you.
Let me help you out a little bit there, though. You have a public works department in your county government, and they maintain all your county roads. You have some number of employees, probably 20 or 30 or 50, I don't know. All the equipment, all the gravel, all the asphalt that you buy to maintain those local roads, that's coming out of your general fund.
Mm-hmm.
So the sales tax that's collected is also going into your general
Correct.
fund. So you don't have that broken out in front of you, but you can get that number pretty
sure,
quick.
Yeah. Be glad to.
Like
Be glad
most
to share
counties,
with you.
you're spending more on roads in the county than you're collecting just at the gas
Sure.
pump. So I really believe there's a good argument on that.
Yeah.
We got an ACCG rep.
Oh,
down there.
yeah, he may be a little bashful. He's going to have to start talking because tomorrow meets halfway mark on this committee. So, but no, you can jump in any time. But I just think from my experience, you're spending a lot more on roads than you're collecting at the gas pump.
Yes.
On the local option sales.
Yes, and that's basically what we're having to do as much as, we're actually having to not only do it just through our general fund, but we're having to spend a lot of opportunities there with our SPLOST revenue to move it into transportation as well.
It's about $518 million across the state. Local option sales tax is collected off motor fuel.
Okay.
Across the state. And to answer one of your questions, in Tiff County, I know it's close to 60% of the local SPLOST is collected from non-residents of Tiff County. Last time we checked, and Roger May can answer that. I think he. So in other words, you wasn't paying attention.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
What I would also say, though, is there are many counties that spend a lot more money on transportation because they raise the money locally. You know, my county has a $200 million bond, strictly transportation, on the November ballot, of which over $80 million of it is going to state roads, because we understand that the state simply doesn't have the money. So for the good of economic development, we're going to put and T-SPLOST failed miserably in our community also, but I think not because there wasn't a need there, it was just the way that it was presented maybe. Right. And so I'm very confident that this time, with the help of DOT, that it will pass, and in our community we're very willing to help the state do that, because we know pointing fingers and saying it's a state responsibility doesn't help anybody, and it's a good collaborative effort of working together, and I hope that it's going to be successful.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Actually, it's a question to you. And $518 million, how much of that, for instance, there are certain local sales taxes that we know do not go to transportation. For instance, SPLOST goes to education, and we also know that we have in certain areas a host, and that doesn't go to transportation either, just simply goes to reduce the amount of property taxes. Do we have that breakdown in terms of where that $518 million?
No, we don't. All we have is the number,
the raw number,
and we can get it by county,
yeah,
how much is collected, but we can't get it by cities. We can't get it from revenue. We've tried, and that's something we're still trying to work on. But it's each county can probably give you what that local breakdown is. Clint, I imagine each county. Go ahead.
Oh, we can tell you from the general fund how much they're spending on transportation-related functions, and then we can look at the only sales tax from the county and city side that goes into the general operations would be that local option sales tax. It replaces property tax in that general fund, which would pay for the road department, things of that nature. And then the SPLOST obviously dedicated specifically to capital. And in your case, if you're spending 30% of your SPLOST, the question is, what percent of your total SPLOST dollars come from motor fuel? And my guess is it probably is not more than that, probably less than that.
Right.
Yeah. And if I may, the purpose of my question is this: is that, I keep hearing, if I may, just this pure question, I keep hearing two different figures. One is folks are telling me that we're not spending and we're not raising enough money off the gas tax for transportation. And then I hear, well, but compared to other states, because we are putting a lot of taxes on gas that don't necessarily go to gas, we have high gas taxes in the state. I'm just trying to figure out exactly what the figures are in terms of the money that's actually going to transportation and going to other purposes, and maybe we need to start trying to tighten up the amount of taxes on gas. Make sure. And I understand, but I'm just trying to figure that out.
Okay. I mean, last year I had a little piece of legislation that we dropped just for some conversation, but that was the figure that we were given last year.
Yes, sir, I know.
And but you're right, it's moving forward. I mean, it is something when we look at a lot of states around us. Actually, only I think it's Alabama, if I remember right, that actually allows a portion of local sales tax dollars to be or local option sales tax to be charged on motor fuel. South Carolina does not, North Carolina does not, Tennessee does not, and Florida does not. Yeah. Unless that's changed within the last year. They don't allow local option sales tax of any any kind to be charged on motor fuel. So sometimes that's what bumps us up above the South Carolinas of the world. So it is something to look at. And I'll say this, you got a lot of counties out there that are probably spending more than what they're collecting on that as well. So it is something to be looked at. But as the commissioner said, you know, I live in the same region that he lives in. Concerning the T-Splosh, I would tell you that I won't say that there was a lot of people that were lying, because I don't believe that they would lie. There was just some misinformed individuals out there and uneducated that was out there spreading stuff that actually was not true, but it was easy for them to say. You know, one of the comments that we constantly heard was, all this money is going to Atlanta. I'm sure you heard it, and I heard it, and every one of us in this room that was involved in that heard that, which was absolutely not true. I mean, the whole piece of legislation was designed so that that money raised in that region stayed in that region. But it was hard for us to spend 30 or 45 minutes trying to explain it to them where they could get out there. And like I said, they were just uneducated and misinformed. Because I know they wasn't trying to mislead anybody by that, but that was one of the situations we had to address. Absolutely, Clint, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I appreciate you being here today. And sorry you've been having to stand up there for so long. Just a quick question. I know with the regional T-Splosh, in one region, they felt the need to basically divvy it up and use it for primarily local projects. In the other two regions, it was used more, I guess, for what it was intended for, which was regional projects. We've talked about the differences between South Georgia and the Atlanta area. Obviously, in the Atlanta area, you have a lot of big regional projects, a lot of people commuting from one county to another. The county I live in, 80% of the people leave the county every day for a job. So there's a lot of cross-border commuting. In your area, can you give us a sense of what you view as, say, transportation needs in the next 10 years, how much of those transportation needs are solely contained within your county versus how much of those needs are cross-jurisdictional boundaries? And when I'm saying cross-jurisdictional, I really mean multiple counties, not within the city and the county.
Well, I certainly think long-term, from a long-term standpoint, it is a regional aspect. The issue with us having better connectivity with the port is extremely important, and for the South Georgia market and for that area economically. So as we look at that and we look at the inland ports and then connecting all of those together, certainly that's going to be very, very key long range, so that so that all these communities will be able to benefit from better economic times when they begin to come around. As I said earlier, the whole thing is not something that's going to be fixed tomorrow. It's going to be long range, and that's what we need to be planning for, is so that when things do begin to get better and we begin to be able to take advantage of it, we're not then trying to worry out, okay, well, how are we going to fix our transportation problem, because now we really do have a problem. We need to do it today so that we'll be prepared, so that when things do begin to improve, we'll be able to move goods and products up and down the roads, and not just our interstate systems, but our byways and connecting our other communities and regional areas, and certainly our port area is going to be extremely important. So at long range, certainly the regional aspect. I think all communities have short-term issues that needs to be addressed today, just as Commissioner Downing was saying. Certainly, he's got a bridge that's a major issue in his county. We have our interstate exchanges with some logistic locations that takes a tremendous amount of beatings. With semi-trucks, that's got to have a good bit of maintenance and a good bit of repair that's got to be done to those, and those connecting highways. So we have our local issues that has to be addressed, and certainly our bridges and infrastructure as well. I won't raise my hand again. No.
No, actually, no. We appreciate everything you've had to say, and we do. We thank you for coming up, and we appreciate
Glad to do it.
What you've said here today. Any other questions? Okay, we're going to let you sit down then.
Thank you.
But thank you. We're going to try to stay.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, are you coming back after lunch, Mayor? Well, then we're going to wait and let you and the tag team from the mayor from Tifton kind of let y'all tag team after lunch.
I just wanted to support the chairman on a couple of things, that's all.
And that way we make y'all come back after lunch. But no, we encourage that. For us to stay on schedule, we're actually going to break for lunch. If the panelists and legislators would, if y'all will follow Miss Pam, she's got everything set up for you. For the rest of you, I encourage you to go down to the dining hall here. And I know when I say that, everybody's going to say, the dining hall. But I will tell you this, ABAC has probably one of the best dining halls that you will ever eat at. Yeah, it is absolutely wonderful food. And so I encourage you to go down there, get you some lunch, and encourage you to walk around this campus while you're here today and actually see what we have going on here at ABAC. It is a beautiful campus. It is a beautiful institution. You know, they have taught some wonderful individuals as we have come through this campus. You don't have our arrest records here by the campus police, do you? Okay. But with that being said, we're going to break for lunch. We're going to be back at 1 o'clock, and we're going to try to stay on schedule because we're going to leave here this afternoon, and we're going to drive up to Mary Records community in Macon and get ready to have another one of these tomorrow. So encourage everybody to come back at 1 o'clock. With that, we're going to adjourn real quick for lunch.
Hey, Jay.
All right, with that being said, I do want to recognize Amy Carter. She's joined us. Representative Amy Carter, stand up for us. Stand up. We're glad to have her from Lowndes County. And is Darlene, she hadn't come back in yet. I was going to recognize Representative Darlene Taylor, but she hadn't come back. She just came for now. When she gets back over, we'll recognize her too. All right. With that being said, where's Jay? Didn't somebody has some questions for you?
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to ask Chairman Shaw, I know you recently came back from SASHTO, which is how many states? 13 states. And I just wanted to ask the chairman if he picked up on anything any of those 13 states are doing, or what you're hearing. I guess they're all facing the same problems we are, funding.
Some of them are facing much.
Hand him a mic where he can sit there and talk.
What's going on in 13 southern states, we're no different than any other state. It's funding, it's funding, it's funding. We have found out that we're better in Georgia maybe than some others as far as our maintenance. But here's the deal. In Florida, and I think we got a speaker coming from Florida, they spend $800 million on routine maintenance. We spend $200 million on routine maintenance and have more road miles. So what's going to happen in the future is we've always had the opportunity, and we've had the best roads in the country. But now, with the money that we have for maintenance, for routine maintenance, and for the capital improvements on routine maintenance, we can only do 2% a year. So that means that we can resurface every road in the state of Georgia. It'll take 50 years. So you can see what that's going to do. But thank you for asking. We had a good out, and I'll get with you and the committee and give you some information of other states around us. And we did find out that some of them in dire needs, just like us.
Thank you. Which mayor wants to go first?
Well, I believe that my good friend, Mayor from Valdosta, will follow up on what the Commission Chairman Lowndes said.
Well, he is recognized. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm John.
Can you hear me? Okay. Jamie is used to using a microphone because he plays in a band, but I'm not. But anyway, when I ran for mayor 3 years ago, the first thing that I had to wrestle with was T-Splosh. And when I was campaigning, I decided that I was against T-Splosh. And but when I was elected and I went into office and I saw what our needs were and I saw the list, the T-Splosh list, I immediately reversed my stance on that. And I called one of my supporters who I knew was against T-Splosh, and I said, I'm sorry, but I've had to change my mind after I learned some things about what's going on, and I'm now in favor and going to support T-Splosh wholeheartedly, and I did for the next 3 months until that particular person came to the council meeting and presented me with a pair of flip-flops because I had flip-flopped my stance on that. But anyway, that's neither here nor there, but I will tell you this. Our revenues in Valdosta have gone down substantially in the last year. June of this year was the first time that we have exceeded fiscal year 2013 in revenues. For 11 months prior to that, we were well below our revenues. Three or four reasons for that. One is the TABT tax. We feel like that we've gotten pretty much all the money we're going to get from that. It's going to continue to decline as things go forward without the birthday tax. The other thing is the energy tax, and don't get me wrong, I'm all for that. But in Valdosta, we had the second largest user of energy in the state of Georgia, and it has knocked a hole in our revenues. Now, the other thing is the gate card. We've got 1,500 users, and Ellis, am I correct? Somewhere around 1,500 users of the gate card in Lowndes County alone. And we not only have that, we have people coming out of North Florida that have secured a gate card, and they're coming up there and buying their supplies and not paying any taxes on it. So what does that say to us? All right, we passed a splosh this past year, and Valdosta's portion of that, thanks to Lowndes County, and I'm sorry the chairman had to leave. He said he heard I was going to speak, and so, but anyway, our portion we projected would be $80 million over the next 6 years. We're now saying that that's not going to happen. We're going to be somewhere around 68 to 70 projected. We are behind the eight ball because we have to spend, and we have no choice whatsoever. We have got to replace a wastewater treatment plant. We're under a consent order by EPA. It's going to cost us $55 to $58 million. And so that leaves us with $12 million approximately to spend on everything else in the next 6 years. And quite honestly, it's not going to, you know, our roads, bridges, streets, repaving, things like that, we've had to take money from that in order to put into that wastewater treatment plant. If we don't have that finished by the year 2018, then EPA is going to start taking money from us, fining us, and that'll hinder our transportation even more. So I just wanted to tell you, you know, what we're facing right now. We have started on the project, and EPA is monitoring us daily on what our progress is on that wastewater treatment plant. So we've got to work hard on it. We have a few transportation issues. Highway 133 course is being 4-lane from Valdosta to Albany, and for some reason, exit 18, where that comes in, which was on the TIP list, has disappeared. That project has disappeared. So that's going to be, and we had a death out there not too long ago at that particular exit. Had a tractor trailer run clear across the short exit there and almost into Olive Garden. And so that exit needs to be back on that list. We hadn't found out why it's not, but it was taken off. The other thing is our downtown truck traffic. We've asked and asked and asked for help on that. We have two highways, US 84 and US 41, going through the middle of Valdosta. And right now we're taking pictures of trucks trying to turn in the middle of Valdosta and up on the sidewalk, and people can't believe the problems they're causing. So somehow we've got to get a bypass around that particular area. And we can't do it. We've got to have the help. So just to name a few problems and make you aware of them, what we're having down there, we are thankful that 52% of our sales tax money comes in from outside of Lowndes County. We have a daytime population of 88,000 people that come into Valdosta. Our nighttime population is 55. 88,000 people come into Valdosta and work, eat, spend money, shop, whatever. And if it wasn't for that, we'd been a lot of, and that was the reason a lot of people voted against T-Splosh. They said, well, we can't collect money here and help Barron County or Cook County. Well, I tried to explain to them that those people were the ones that were paying for that, and they were coming in and spending their money. But we had some hard heads in Valdosta, and some of you know who they are, and we'd like some help in maybe relocating those. But anyway, that's all I have to say. I'll try to answer a question if anybody has any. If not, I'll sit down and shut up.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Mr. Mayor, with the commercial tax base you have with all those jobs, have y'all thought about creating a community improvement district in Valdosta?
Well, we already have.
Oh, you have?
Yes, we've had that. In fact, our downtown area, they had a special tax down there. It was a 20-year tax, and those people paid it off in 12 years. We just burnt the note last year. And they're still paying, I think it's 5 mills, if I'm not.
And that's all invested in that area?
That's all invested in the downtown area, yes. You know, of course, our transportation really is our asset because we're on I-75 and we've got the two highways running north and south and east and west. So Valdosta's always been a good point for distribution. We've got Home Depot, Lowe's, Dillard's, and so it's very very important that we keep our transportation system in order and that we don't let it go downhill. And but we're not going to be able to do it by ourselves.
Any other question?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Just a question. I'm going to ask all the elected officials. The ones up here are going to have to make some tough decisions. What do you believe that we ought to be doing in terms of increasing revenue?
Well, let me tell you this. I just came through South Carolina last weekend. My wife and I have a daughter and her family in North Carolina, and we were up there, and I had a couple of days I didn't have anything on my calendar, and I said, well, let's just drive down to Charleston, spend the night, and then drive on in the next day. Well, I got down there, and I stopped at an old place that we went to several years ago, and they said, yeah, they had a room. And so I gave them a card and looked at, they told me what the bill was. Well, when I got the bill the next morning, it was almost $100 higher than what they had told me. And I got to looking, they got a sales tax of 9.5%. They got a city tax, they got a county tax, and then a hotel motel tax. But all that said, they got the worst roads anywhere I've ever been on. So, you know, that's not necessarily it. I think it's going to take a special tax. I really do. And whether that's a region or what, I've talked to some of the people that have the T-Splosh that passed it, and they're very happy. You know, they're very happy with it. So I think it's going to take something like that. The gas tax, quite honestly, you know, we get bombarded every day about our gas being as high as it is in Florida now and everything. So, but even, I mean, we have a low gas tax, quite honestly, but people complain about that. But I think it's going to take a special tax dedicated strictly to roads, bridges, highways, and infrastructure like that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mayor, you weren't the only one that didn't support it. I know we was in Columbus, and the mayor there at the time didn't support it, nor any of the city government officials. But they'll tell you now it's the best thing that ever happened.
Right.
And what they realized was everything that we were telling them came to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them kept saying, well, you know, this ain't going to happen, or that ain't, this is what you tell us. But at the end of the day, Everything that we said was going to happen has happened, and those 3 regions are tickled to death because of it. And so maybe we can get it back in our region.
Well, I had one of my opponents, I guess you would call him, send me an email the other day after all this business about Burger King leaving the country and all that, and he said taxes are the reason everybody's leaving. So I sent it back, and I said, yeah, 39% corporate tax is probably a reason. It certainly isn't sales tax, and it certainly isn't T-splost or E-splost or lost. But anyway, I have to deal with that person on a daily basis.
I probably know who you're talking about. Any more questions?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a question. I just want to thank the mayor for his comments and share with you a Winston Churchill quote when somebody called him to task about changing his position. He said, "I'd rather be right than consistent."
That's good. I'll remember that. Yeah. All right.
All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank y'all.
Now, I'm going to recognize her because she's back in here this time. I don't want to make sure for Representative Darlene Taylor's back here. She's from Thomas County, so we're glad to have her with us as well. Mayor, do you want to say a few words?
Not really.
Well, you don't have to now. But I know you. You're going to go on anyway.
Well, I will.
Go ahead.
It is a pleasure to address this august body. Thank you for coming down to old South Georgia where you have to swat a few gnats and shoo a few flies. Let me tell you, I did a stint with DOT, Keith, in my years. I've got 2 sons that work for that man right there. I want you to know that DOT has come a long way. I don't have anything bad to say at all. We're doing more with less than we ever have. I can remember there was 12 to 1,500 employees when I was there in the 70s and the 80s. Joe, what you got now, 600 employees district-wide? 700?
District-wide, we've got
434, and they're doing more than they were doing when I was there. Now, I might have been one of the reasons we weren't doing as much. I don't know.
Say, Mayor, now that,
I said that before you could say it,
yeah,
Jay.
okay.
But I'm proud, and I know that our city manager and all of us are very happy with what GDOT is doing. They're working very, very hard. You've got good leadership. You've got a fantastic board with Jay and those folks. But I'm going to talk briefly before I sit up here and let sugar run out of my mouth. I want to talk about trains. Of course, Jay, you knew I'd talk about trains because I'm part-time in the train business. Of course, we're a short line. We have 2 lines. We have one that goes from Valdosta up to Willacoochee. And, Jay, you may not know this. We've got one now that goes from Macon. Mayor, that's Macon, not Macon, up to Madison, Georgia. But trains are the future to move people. You can build just so many roads. And I know that y'all have been out talking about rail. I mean, I've seen, Corey, you've had some things down there in Valdosta. We've been there twice on that. And Amy, we really do need to really sink our teeth in mass transit. I know we're talking about moving something from, where is it, Savannah over to Macon. I try to keep up with all this stuff. But I think everybody that's spoken so far has said great things, and there'll be other people in the company that'll say better things than me. But I'd just like us to not take our eye off of that transit rail. You can move a lot of people. You can take a lot of trucks, and if there's any truckers in here, I'm not picking a fight with the trucking industry by any means. But what I always tell people, the more trucks you get in my business as a short line operator, when I get more of those trucks off the rail, I have a safer highway for my family to travel on and other people's family, and it doesn't tear up the roads as bad. And I don't think they pay as much tax as they need to. I think they should be taxed maybe a little differently. And I agree with my brother John, too. I think there ought to be some way to do it, toll roads, whatever. I don't have the answer. But I know with y'all going around the state and doing what you're doing, I'm very proud of that. And I think you're going to find some answers. And you're going to find a lot of people that have a lot of input. And that's really all I wanted to say.
Any questions? And he didn't tell you he's the mayor of Tifton. Any questions? All right, then you mentioned mass transit. Now, you talking about mass transit, or are you talking about rapid rail?
Rapid rail, I'm sorry. Did I say mass transit?
I just wanted to make sure. I was trying to figure out in
Well, I'm
Tifton
sorry.
where we was going.
I'm very sorry. I told you I was in the short line business. I can't keep it all straight, can I?
Hey.
But, you know, short line's doing good. You know, the Hog Railroad, the inland port. I mean, the whole thing with Savannah. Isn't that wonderful?
It is.
I mean, that's not just for Cordele. That's regional. That's for half of Georgia. So we've got some great things. And let me tell you something. Rail is the future. And y'all stay on top of that.
All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank y'all very much.
This time we're going to go back to Mr. Lowell Cleary, and it wasn't his fault this morning. We just had some miscommunication, but he's here this afternoon, so we wanted to give him a chance to speak as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for background, I spent 25 years in public service in Florida. The majority of that with Florida DOT, and ended up my career. They don't have a commissioner in Florida. They have a secretary, which is very interesting when you advertise for positions. They get a lot of interesting applications for that job. I was an assistant secretary, so I was one level down from those other positions, and the chief financial officer for the DOT. And I've got some information that are up on the screens over here, and I've got copies at the table for everyone, and we've got some extra copies. Probably don't have enough for everyone. If anybody wants a copy, we'll post it to our website, and I'll send you a link for it collectively. This is what I'm going to go over today. Not going to spend much time on the funding challenge. Talk briefly about what other states are doing. We're doing studies in a number of states, looking at how they're raising revenues or some of their challenges. We're going to provide an overview of Florida, which is more of what I was asked to do, and a brief overview on innovative finance and delivery, and then talk briefly about next steps. So I'm not going to preach to the choir. You know this. The picture for federal funding is very, very bleak right now. It's unclear. Lots of discussion. There's little action about funding at the federal level. There's motor fuel tax challenges, which I'll go through in more detail. So what's happened is many people have talked about a concept called devolution, where essentially you have the federal program move more down to the states and the locals. And there was a lot of talk about this back in the late 90s and early 2000s in Congress. And what's happened is it happened by default, okay, because they really haven't raised much revenue at the federal level since about '03, and they really haven't raised taxes at the federal level since the early 90s. So there really has not been an increase in the federal program from a funding perspective. And what you're looking at right now is the Highway Trust Fund, and I know the Commissioner talked about this in his comments to the committee, so I won't belabor the point, but it's broke. Okay, so they're basically taking a lot of money out of the general fund to fund the Highway Trust Fund at the federal level, and deficit funding. Nobody wants to do that. So it's not a good picture. And the bottom line is the system continues to grow and the needs continue to grow. So what are other states doing? There are a number of states that have passed gas tax increases, and this is over about the past 2.5 years, including California did a 10% increase, which is about 3 to 4 cents a gallon. Massachusetts, Maryland, New Hampshire, Vermont, Wyoming. Okay, Wyoming. Okay, the other ones you might think were a little more of the liberal persuasion. Wyoming, not so much. Okay, they tend to vote pretty conservatively. Did a 10 cents increase. Some others have done sales tax. Arkansas did a half cents on their sales tax, and they bonded that. Georgia, you know the story there with 3 regions. Virginia replaced their gas tax with a sales tax. And there's a lot of general things going on. Talked about Arkansas bonding. Maine is doing some bonds from the general fund. Ohio raised their turnpike tolls, and they've directed that to the DOT program. Okay, they directed that increase to the general DOT program. And if you've never been in the state of Ohio, their toll road, their main toll road is actually the interstate. Okay, so it's their regular interstate system. And Texas has got a measure they passed legislatively, and on the ballot they're going to have the voters look at directing some of the oil and gas tax revenues, which currently primarily go to the general fund, to go to transportation, about $1 billion a year. So what's being considered? You talked about this as far as SASHTO. Every state, just about that I'm aware of, has commissions like this. They're all looking at the funding issue, and they have looked at everything. What most are starting to realize is, you know, the manna coming from heaven, coming from Congress, is getting less and less likely. So everybody's kind of looking at, maybe we need to do something ourselves. Maybe we need to look at the state and the local level. So everything's being considered. And when I say everything, I mean everything. General sales tax, general fund money being shifted, overall gas tax increases, tolling, okay, motor vehicle fees, everything on the board is being looked at. The bills are endless that have been filed across the country. However, a lot of them hadn't passed. Okay? A lot of them hadn't passed. One of the things that's being studied more and more is to look at what you might consider tolling or pricing the road. What's happened is the technology is to the point of where the old concept you might have seen if you drove on Florida's Turnpike where they had toll booths and you had to stop and throw your quarters in, that's going away. Okay? What's out there in the new systems is gantries over the road, okay, and they either pick you up from your little toll tag, the electronic toll tag, or they get your license plate and they send you a post bill, which costs more, by the way. Those are up and running in Colorado. Florida has that, in Miami-Dade County now, and most other areas around the country that are putting in new toll roads. That's how they're going to do it.
Is that a new capacity or existing roads?
Both. They're doing some of both. And if you're interested in some detail, essentially what happened in Washington, they needed to replace some bridges, so they tolled them. They were not tolled before that. So essentially they looked at it locally and said these are high-cost bridges. These were really big bridges in the Seattle area. And they said, we got to deal with this. So they said, we're going to toll it. And they put a toll on it, and it was non-tolled. Okay? So that's been done, and it's primarily for high-cost bridges, which is allowed under the federal law. If it's a federal law, federal bridge, you can do that. In addition, most of these are either new capacity or they're conversions of what I would call unused capacity.
One more question, Mr. Chairman. Is this P3 work, public-private partnerships?
In the state of Washington, no. They are not. In some other areas like Texas, they are. So they've been done both ways. In the state of Washington, they had tolls way back. Like back in the 70s, they took the tolls off. Now they're reestablishing tolls and moving back in that direction. They actually have a strategic plan they're looking at that I'll be helping them with a study on over the next year that's looking at pricing their entire expressway system in the state. Because they really believe the gas tax within 10 or 15 years is not going to be viable in their state. And I'll show you a little bit more on the gas tax later. But what they're looking at is not toll booths. It's basically a new way to raise revenue. Okay, it's just a different way to raise revenue. I'm going to talk about some Florida case studies. I'll give you a general overview of transportation funding in Florida. And please, Mr. Chairman, if there are questions along the way, I'll be happy to answer those as we go. I want to make a point. Choices are becoming more popular, and I'll give you some examples of those. And you've seen that in the state of Georgia, too. And the use of the economic growth when that occurs to provide increases, and notice the word no new taxes. Okay, so it was done through growth, and I'll give you those examples as we look at this in more detail. This is Florida DOT. Where you see their logo on the sheet, that is actually a slide from Florida DOT. This is their what they call their 5-year work program, and these are their funding sources. Notice tolls are about 10% of their funding sources, about $4.2 billion over that 5-year program. The state is about 56%, and the federal program is down to 27%. Looking at the state revenue stream, there's 2 fuel taxes. that are statewide. The blue one is the old traditional state tax. The orangish color one, they always look different up on the screen. Reddish orange is also a statewide tax, but it only became statewide when every local community implemented their local option gas tax at a minimum of 5 cents. Okay, until it did, then it kind of phased in within those areas. There is also motor vehicle fuels, motor vehicle fees, which are the next highest of a general tax, and that's your vehicle registration, your annual fees for that, for titling vehicles, and they also have one on rental cars that's $2 a day that's charged for the first 30 days you have a rental car. And I'll talk briefly about something called dock stamps a little bit later, so we can go through that. This is the gas tax in the state of Florida. If you add all this up, counting the local option, which I'll go through in a little bit more detail, the base is about 47.5 cents, and the highest it can go is about 55 cents. Okay, and that's per gallon. Now, the state piece that you see is indexed to inflation. And what that means is that yellow-blue in the middle is every year on January 1, based off of what the prior year's inflation rate was for general inflation, that tax rate automatically adjusts. Okay, now that's a closely held secret in Florida. Okay, people don't like to talk about that too much, but it's been in law since the early 90s, and both Democratic and Republican administrations have been in office during that time period, and they both said, we think this is a pretty smart way to do this. We're just not going to talk about it too loudly. Okay, now what did that raise in revenue? You may think, oh, a little index, it's just going to be a penny here, a penny there. Well, this chart shows you since it was begun in the early 90s, it's over almost $7 billion since then. Okay, so it adds up. And you can see annually it keeps adding over time. So that's quite a bit of money, and that has really made a difference in transportation programs in Florida. So let's talk about some local revenue sources. There's 4 pennies of a gas tax that goes to the locals directly, and then there's a local option fuel tax, which is 1 to 12 cents, and I'll show you a map on that in just a minute. There's also a local option infrastructure sales tax. There's really 2 of them that can be implemented by county, and the local option fuel tax is by county as well. And of course, there are local fees that can be done. Many counties in Florida have impact fees for development and other areas that they do. So how are the choices being used? You have the local option gas tax. You have the local option sales tax. They're also doing toll roads and bridges. These are not state generated. These are locally generated. Most of them bottom up, if not all of them bottom up from the local communities. And there's also express lane networks, which I'll talk about, as well as transit options that are being put in place. This gives you a map. There's 67. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. I just want to clarify before you get too far down the line. If I look at this chart on page 9 or slide 9, it appears to, am I reading it correctly to see that in the overall transportation revenue that you receive, that the motor fuel tax is actually anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2 probably of the overall fuel transportation tax that's received?
Well, if you add in tolls, okay, which tolls are actually the second highest in the state of Florida, which are not on this chart. These are just general taxes. You have to add the blue and the red together to come up with a state fuel tax.
Okay.
Okay, so it's really closer to about
So
a
we're
half.
closer to a half then
Correct.
anyway.
Correct.
Whereas Georgia is pretty much, well, you have some local, but it's a very different percentage than what we're looking at here in Georgia then.
Right.
So another way of saying that, Florida has moved ahead and sees that the motor fuel tax is becoming very obsolete. Also, it subsidizes electric vehicles and high mileage vehicles like other utilities do, And so you've gone ahead and progressively moved forward with other forms of revenue other than the motor fuel tax.
And really what Florida has done, I think, effectively is look at where you can harness the energy of growth. For example, they have what's called an initial registration fee, which means every new person that moves in the state of Florida pays a one-time initial registration fee when they register their car. Okay, and it's a couple $100. So that raises about $100 million a year for transportation.
So that's $200 right there, whereas in Georgia we're saying that the person that drives 12,000 miles a year, 24 miles a gallon, their whole motor fuel tax for the year is only $85. Right. So in Florida, someone signs up and they've already paid over twice what the Georgia person is paying before they've bought the first gallon of gas.
Right. The other thing Florida looked at was tourism and how that's going to bring in particular revenue. So a lot of people rent cars in Florida. We have the biggest rental car market in the world, and those rental cars pay $2 a day extra that goes to transportation. So that's also looking at where you can harness how your economy is generating that revenue that may not necessarily be off your traditional tax base.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, one final question. Just to, I heard from people that were in New Orleans that the Florida number was I don't recall exactly, somewhere around $7 or $8 billion a year compared to our probably $2 billion. Is that, I don't know if that's a...
Well, the 5-year work program chart I had before is 5 years at $41 billion, so it's averaging around $8 billion a year.
So Florida, who we compete with in a lot of different ways, is spending $8 billion a year on road transportation, whereas Georgia is spending $2 billion if you count everything. We know a lot less than that gets to the actual road, but comparable numbers. That's correct. I'm just trying to make sure we're clear.
That's it. That would be comparing Florida DOT to Georgia DOT.
Right.
That doesn't count the local area, which I'll show you a little bit more on in a minute.
Thank you.
This is the local option gas tax, and you can see counties do this optional, so they get to set this rate locally. Of the total 12 cents, 7 cents is a simple majority vote of the commission. The additional 5 cents is either a super majority vote of the commission or it's a vote of the people to implement this particular fuel tax. This is how much this generates a year. These 1 to 12 cents is over $800 million a year. This does not count sales tax. This is just a local option gas tax. Local option sales tax, as I mentioned, there's two types. There's a charter county transportation tax that is strictly for transportation. 3 counties have done that particular sales tax. There is another which is called the infrastructure surtax, which is essentially for any capital improvements within the county, which could be a jail, could be a courthouse, could be a road, those types of things. But just about every county in Florida has enacted some form of this. Okay, either a infrastructure sales tax, a charter county transit tax, or the small counties have done their particular small county. Theirs are more flexible about what they can use the funds for in the smaller rural counties. Because just the difference is the infrastructure surtax is capital improvements only. In smaller counties, they have more flexibility on being able to use some of that sales tax for operating cost as well as capital improvements. So I mentioned locally developed toll facilities. Look at the second bullet here. Almost all new centerline miles in Florida, that's a new road, okay, not widening existing road. These are new roads were developed through toll facilities since the 80s. And essentially what they've realized is there's not enough money to build new roads. So if you want to build a new road, you look at these as optional new roads, and they can be tolled. Now, the one thing in Florida they have is there are no non-compete agreements, which means if somebody says, I want to build a toll road here, the DOT is not going to say, well, I'm not going to build something next to you. Okay, and this is a local community doing this. Now, Commissioner can tell you he's probably not going to do that because he can't afford to build a competing road. He's going to be happy that other road's there. He's going to focus on widenings and the other things he's got to do to keep his system running. But the bottom line is that's how Florida got these systems. How many of you been to Orlando? Okay, did you pay a toll? Of course you did. Okay, the only thing in Orlando that's not tolled is I-4. Now, the local community did that. They chose to do that to themselves because otherwise they were not going to grow. They were not going to grow as a community. Now, in rural areas, that's not going to work very well because you have to have traffic that generates revenue that's going to pay for that road. Okay? But the other thing Florida's looked at is maybe I don't have to have every toll road pay 100% of its cost. Maybe I can set the toll a little bit lower and I put some grant money in it, say 20%, 30%, 40%, and the tolls pay for the rest of it. That just makes the overall pie grow and get bigger. Okay, so the commissioner can spread his money further in that particular scenario. This is what the revenues are generating from tolls in the state of Florida. In 2015, it's approaching $1.5 billion a year. And these are all over the state. We have toll bridges in the Panhandle. If you've been to Destin, you probably drove the toll bridge there. Okay, in Tampa Bay, in Orlando, in Southwest Florida and Lee County, the Turnpike. Okay, now you may say, hey, we're Georgia, we don't have toll roads. Okay, right, Tallahassee doesn't either. Okay, but a landowner there said, I need to put a road in, and it's between two major routes. The DOT looked at it and said, we're good, we're supportive. The county looked at it and said, we're good and we're supportive. You got to build it. So he's moving forward with it. They have authorized it. The land's being donated to the county, and it's going to turn around and be a long-term P3 that's going to build a new road. It's not an expressway. It's a local road. It's going to have one toll gantry on it. And we did surveys in the local area. We had a political guy, okay, runs political campaigns. He was our public relations guy. Said they'll never accept it. They'll absolutely hate it. They won't like it at all. They went out and did surveys, okay, talking to people in their face, one-on-one, talking about a toll road, talking about toll rates. It was overwhelmingly supported. Because what the public said is, I don't have that road today. That'll give me a new option. And I have a choice whether to pay that or not. And most of them said they would because guess what? It provides them a much quicker route to the airport. So anybody flying in and out of the airport there is going to do that. So again, don't dismiss things simply because you haven't ever done it. Sometimes you have to kind of think outside the box and say, is that something that might work here? And talk about it. Because you may be surprised. And what I call is the pain index. Okay, that's what I named it when I was at Florida DOT. When the pain index gets high enough, the public will do things you don't expect. And what I mean by that is if they're sitting in traffic long enough, they may say, hey, I'm paying $5 for my Starbucks coffee. What's 75 cents to pay for going quicker on the road? Express lane networks kind of generated out of that. The first one came in that was essentially, how many of you know what an express lane is? Okay, some of you do. These are essentially taking your expressways and either building a new road or converting a high-occupancy vehicle lane like you have in Atlanta into an express lane. And what that means is the high-occupancy vehicles still go free. Others can use capacity in it for paying a toll. Now, you still have the free lanes. Those didn't go away. They're still there. So basically, you're putting a toll road within a non-toll road, and it gives people a choice. Now, what happens is when traffic's congested, that toll rate goes up because what you do with those express lanes is they're not express if they don't move. So you have to raise the toll so the traffic moves and less people use it. And what you're doing is you're guaranteeing people a level of service. So you may think, why would you do that? Well, I do business in Miami and I fly out of Fort Lauderdale. Okay, used to I had to leave 3 hours ahead to catch a flight out of Fort Lauderdale before express lanes because I never could be guaranteed the traffic. There was always an accident. There was always something. It just never worked. Okay, well, today I can leave an hour and 20 minutes from Miami and make a flight every single time in Fort Lauderdale. So that's 3 hours versus an hour and 20 minutes. So I generated almost 2 hours of additional productive time because of having an express lane available. This is what's happening in Southeast Florida. The first segment, which is the red, the southern part is open today and operating. It was opened as a pilot in Miami-Dade County in the overall Miami area because said to the local community, they were kind of like, well, we're not sure about this. We said, we'll put it as a pilot, run it for 4 years. If you don't like it, we'll put it back the way it was. They were like, okay. You could never take it away today. It's been in operation since 2007. They would absolutely cream you if you tried to do away with it today. Okay, what has happened is the locals have now demanded this on all the expressways in southeastern Florida. So you now have construction going further north. The Interstate 595 is open with express lanes. 75 is under construction. Yes, sir.
I don't want to get lost in the weeds on governance here, but who does the Florida Turnpike Authority report to? How does that
There is no longer a Florida's Turnpike Authority. It is part of the DOT. Okay? It's basically like a division of the DOT. The Turnpike Authority was done away in 1969 when they did consolidation of government, and since that point in time, it's been part of the DOT. And these are actually run by the DOT districts. So they're not even part of the Turnpike. The Turnpike collects the revenue, but the actual operations and setting the tolls and all that are done through the traffic management centers that are part of the DOT districts collectively. These are now under construction in Orlando and Tampa Bay. And I think you're going to find express lanes in just about every metro area in the country. And I know you've got one up and operating in Atlanta, and you're adding another one. What I will say is the first one is painful. Okay? It is very, very painful. But once people get used to it and they get moving with it, and I know your challenge in Atlanta is going to be you got different regions, so people may not be using 85. So you're going to have a little bit of pain as you go. And Florida has seen that as they've gone into new metro areas. Orlando was demanding it. Tampa's kind of lackadaisical about it right now. But they'll get there. This is what 95 looks like in southern Florida. The two left lanes are the express lanes, which are moving, and you can see the traffic on the right in the free lanes. That's the choice you get to make every day. So mobility options, I'll talk about a little bit more. This is what's called a strategic, yes sir.
Talk about express lanes. Does Florida, and I've seen them up in the Virginia area, where they have a lane in the middle of the highway that can basically be reversed based on the time of day. Do y'all have anything like that in Florida?
595 is set up that way. Part of what you do is you study the traffic flow. They thought about doing that on 95 initially, but what happens is the traffic is bidirectional. So we had to do 2 lanes north and 2 lanes south because of that. 595 is more of a commuter facility. The western side goes into work in the morning. They come out in the evening, so it is reversible. So you can do both. This is what's called the strategic intermodal system. Back in the early 2000s, Florida said, look, we only have so much money. We need to focus our money on what means the most to our state. So a process was put together where they identified the major highways, the major airports, the major seaports, the major rail facilities, and it's really focused on moving goods and people. And it really looks at both. And rail is both passenger rail and freight rail, looking at both of those options. What this allowed to do was to focus money in a direction on those major facilities. Now, it doesn't forget other facilities. It doesn't mean that. But what it means is it looks at what's really moving the majority of the people and the goods. The other thing it really focused on was what's called the last mile. How many of you seen situations where the truck gets to X point and then it can't get very far past that? You've done this in Savannah where you've looked at the last mile. You've done that in other areas where you have freight transfer facilities or where you're transferring people to look at that last mile and how you close that. And a lot of projects have been done to emphasize that around airports, seaports, rail facilities, and creating a lot of intermodal transfer areas collectively. Now, let's talk a little bit about Governor Bush was in office from 98 to 2006. And during that time, he did two major transportation increases in the state of Florida that I was part of. The first called Mobility 2000. This occurred with no tax increase. And what I mean by that is in the early 90s, the state of Florida did a gas tax increase, it did motor vehicle fee increases, and the budgeteers are smart people. Okay, and the budgeteers said, we're going to put a service fee on all these revenue streams, and they said 7% of those revenues are going to go to the general fund. Okay, and that was another one of those dirty little secrets. Well, Governor Bush said, wait a minute, the people are paying a gas tax, and they're paying their motor vehicle fees for transportation. Kill that service fee. So that 7% went to transportation, and that generated about $350 million a year from those service charges. And that got shifted from the general fund over to the transportation fund. So essentially that was saying this is what it was raised for, this is where we're going to spend the money. They also matched that up with some other things, some bonding programs. Interestingly enough, those bonds have never been issued because Florida only issues bonds when it needs cash. So they didn't need the cash, they didn't issue the bonds collectively, and that advanced about 6 billion projects over about a 5-year period. So in 2005, the governor again said, look, we need to focus on infrastructure. This was part of an overall program that focused on building schools, improving and adding water facilities as well as transportation. It was about $1 billion a year, and you can see the lion's share of it, $750 million went to transportation during that time period. This was also no tax increase. This is where I talked about the documentary stamp tax came into play. So Governor Bush said, what is generating growth? Okay, transportation is helping to generate growth, so let's harness some of those fees that are being supported by growth. The documentary stamp tax is when you transfer real estate. In the state of Florida, there is a fee that you pay as part of that transfer of real estate, and part of that fee goes to transportation. Okay, so the theory was people are moving into Florida, okay, just like they're moving into Georgia, and they're going to generate transfers of land, and that's going to generate fees for that. So again, that's where that went. You can see a bulk of that went into what we call the strategic intermodal system. So this was how we got funding into it and really helped jumpstart a lot of those major projects. It also created some nice discretionary programs that for the locals are very helpful, that provide you the opportunity to take some of your money and then leverage it locally by saying a 50-50 match, or even for rural counties a 75-25 match, where the state would be matching the bulk of it for the more rural areas. It also focused on transit new starts, which is helping fund improvements in Orlando and South Florida as well as other areas. So what happened later? Okay, these things passed. What happened later? All the changes for Mobility 2000, the service charges, that change stuck. Okay, it didn't back up. The state had budget challenges just like you did in Georgia in 2009 through 2013, and there were some raids of the Transportation Trust Fund. Those did happen in Florida, as well as they temporarily rode back some of that documentary stamp tax, okay, because the general fund was hurting, and they had to help balance some of that. Now, you might say, oh, that's bad. Well, that's reality. That's what you have to do to balance your budgets. Every local government, every state government does that when they have budget crunches. But the growth's coming back now, so they're now reshifting those things. And that's one of the ways that the transportation program went from 7 to 8 to 9 billion over the past few years, is reshifting those. This is Florida DOT's interpretation of the gas tax challenge. Okay, and this is what you talked about earlier about electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles. They're looking at the miles per gallon of the fleet going up from the 20s to the mid-30s to even the mid-50s. Well, what happens when you have a gas tax that is per gallon? Okay, you're not going to get as much revenue because people aren't going to buy as much gas. So that revenue source is going to drop. That's why I think you're smart in looking at yours more as a sales tax. And that's more what people are going to have to look at, and that's why they're looking at either pricing the system or sales taxes or some of those. I will tell you, in my history looking at sales tax, the difficulty is they are very, very cyclical related to the economy. Because sales tax are going to be driven by whatever the pricing they're applied to, and when your economy goes down, you know what happens. Less is bought. Whether it's gas, whether it's washing machines, cars, whatever. There's going to be less of that bought. So it's more counter-cyclical to that, and you get into that where it's in that cycle, and you're going to have bigger ups and downs in the program that you've had in the past. One key difference in the programs between Florida and Georgia. Georgia, by law, has to have the cash in the bank before you let a project out to contract. Okay, so the commissioner doesn't have the ability to start work until he has that money on hand. The difference in Florida is Florida has said by law these revenue streams go to transportation. And they've treated it more like you do your private business, okay, where you cash flow it. So they're saying, I'm going to forecast that revenue, and I'm going to forecast the amount of money I've got to pay that contractor, because, Commissioner, you don't pay all that contract on day one, normally. Okay, you pay him as he earns his work. So the contractors are going to earn that work over, if it's a 1-year job, 2-year job, however long it takes. So Florida is saying revenue in the future can pay that. So it's what's called cash flow commitment basis, and it allows different management of that program over time, and I think some flexibility that you may not have today in cash management. So just something to think about. That may be something you can't change or you don't want to change in the future. So in summary, Florida has grown greatly since the 50s. And essentially that growth by necessity, everybody look at a simple pay-as-you-go program, the revenues were fine, but when you've got people flooding in and you've got visitors flooding in, you have to look at how are you going to deal with that, okay, and what are you going to do? So by necessity, it generated a lot of changes to how things are funded and what things can get done and how quickly. And I talked briefly about a state infrastructure bank program, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. So let's talk briefly about innovative finance and delivery. So bonding programs, and I want to make a real clear point on bonding programs on the next page. Bonding programs don't generate new money. Okay? What they're doing is they're advancing money from the future. You got to have a source to repay the bonds. And sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we think bondings will solve the problem. They're simply advancing future money. It's not new money. And what I have found in managing programs is the key is to integrate the bond program with your pay-as-you-go program so that you keep it level. Florida has caps on how much they can bond. They have caps on how much they can do as innovative delivery like P3. So they can't go over a certain level in that program. So it keeps that ongoing funding moving forward over time. And those caps are collectively no more than 20%. Most of the time they're running under 10%. around those levels. Again, because they can manage the cash flow through their program. Okay? And bonds are very efficient when you're talking about a major project. They can be very efficient when you're dealing about a specific project, particularly when it has a dedicated revenue stream or a set of revenue associated with it. What I found politically is when you start talking about program level bonding, and listen, I love politicians. I appreciate the service you provide and what you do, because anybody that stands up to run for office has my respect, because that's a tough job. And essentially, what you have to think about, though, is when you get to a state level or even at a commission level, when you talk about I'm going to do a bond issue, what happens? Everybody says, where's my project? Okay, and the next thing you go, you want to do this big project, and you got this other one, and you got this other one, and you got this other one, and you're starting to bond more than you need to. Okay, and you're eating up a lot more of the program than you can afford. Revolving loan programs can be very efficient. You have a state infrastructure bank in Georgia. Florida has really harnessed this. And I want to make a real comment here, and I'm not trying to be negative towards the state of South Carolina, but the state of South Carolina used their SIB as a general bonding program. And they said their SIB generated like $1.5 billion. It was just a general bonding program. They didn't have the ability to bond, kind of like you bond through CERTA. Okay, they used the SIB to do their general bonding. It was not a state infrastructure bank of the traditional type. Florida has a state infrastructure bank of the traditional type, and they have two accounts. They put federal money into it, and they put state money into it, and that's tough because that means you don't do a project with that money right then. But what they've done with it is they've used it to leverage for, how many of the local folks in here would like to have a low interest loan? Maybe even zero. Okay? Be able to subsidize it. Okay? Those are the kind of things that looked at is how do you help the locals leverage getting projects moving, okay, very efficiently. And what you'll find is, and if you look at the bottom part of this chart, you'll see this leveraged more funds. Okay, in the federal program, $422 million in loans has leveraged $1.48 billion. Okay, now how do you do that? Well, when you loan it out, it gets paid back. You reloan it out. It's a revolving fund. Okay? On the state account, it's even larger. Now, how did they do that? The state legislature in Florida said, you have a loan portfolio of loans, you can go out and borrow against that, provided the market will support that. So there are loans in there that are backed by sales tax, toll revenues, all kinds of other things that are in there that are local fees that come into it. It's got an A rating in the market. So it bonds and it can generate more to then lend out in the future. I was talking about this when I was at DOT with the state legislators, and one of the legislators looks at me and he goes, sounds like a Ponzi scheme. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you're just going to take the money that you borrow and you're going to loan it out, and you're going to borrow more against that, and then you're going to loan that out, and then you're going to borrow more against that. And I said, yes, sir, but this is a Ponzi scheme that works. So you can see 960 million loans have leveraged 7.72 billion in projects. Okay, now the state account is very flexible, and that's one of the things that the SIB, the federal SIB, is a bit inflexible. Okay, it can't do ports, it can't do rail facilities. In Florida, they created a state account and put some state money in it one time, and they've worked with that over time by putting a little bit in over time. And it can be very flexible. It can do rail facilities, ports, intermodal facilities, anything associated with transportation, airports, you name it. Very flexible. And it has been used extremely well. Let's talk briefly about P3s. I'm not going to belabor this point. Design Build Finance is something that you've done on your Northwest project very efficiently. This is not new. Essentially what this means is it's a design build project where you have a finance component to it. These are funds that the DOT has in its program in the future. Yes, sir? So essentially what you can look at is when might you use this? If you're looking for economic stimulus, if you're looking for jobs, if you've got issues like closed bridges, things that you need that are hurting your economy, that's when a design build finance might work. So Florida did 2 projects, and why they did this is the economy was tight, the industry was hungry, and they put these out and got very, very solid bids. And they added extras to these to generate more. On the first one, they added 16 additional miles of widening in the project, and it still came in for less than they had in their program. On the second one, they added 5 bid options, and they thought they'd get 2 of them. They got all 5 of them, and it came in for less. You can see the capped amount was 104. It came in almost $10 million less, and they got all 5 bid options. So this is picking up speed around the country. A lot of new states have got into the space. Pennsylvania, Maryland, Ohio, Illinois have got into this in the past year or so. These are the exception, not the rule. These are typically for big projects where you want to do risk transfer. You need to either cap the cost, you need to have a fixed schedule, things that you can do collectively in the overall project. So these are not going away. They're growing across the country, and you're going to see more of these. So essentially, in summary, the needs are not going away. The competition among the states, what I'm seeing across the country is that states and local communities that are addressing their infrastructure issues are going to be more competitive. They're going to get more industry. They're going to get more jobs. They're going to get more retirees moving into their communities. And there are many options available. And really, your decision is, how are you going to stack up in that competition? Because that's really what it comes down to, is where do you want to go as a state?
All right. Questions? I know y'all got to ask some questions. There's a lot of information. No questions? Go ahead, Mark.
I'm still trying to determine exactly what the question was, but it goes back to that same chart I was looking at on slide 9, having to do with the overall transportation revenue. You mentioned that some of these toll roads, if I look on the slide on slide 18, I'm trying to determine, are some of these toll roads local authorities, for lack of a better term, and I'm trying to determine how many of these are state-run toll authorities and versus local run, and I'm not sure that's the right term for Florida, but trying to distinguish how much of their state and local. And I'm assuming if the locals are going out and doing their own, then those dollars are on those local roads. That's what they're tolling. They're not tolling state roads.
It's a combination. Florida's Turnpike is part of the DOT, and they have 2 other toll roads. All the rest of these are local. They're run by an expressway authority or a bridge authority in that particular local area. Most of them in Orlando are local. Most of them in Tampa are local. Some of them in Miami are local. So those, and essentially what they've done is they've looked at the toll revenues to keep as much of them local as possible. Even when it's a state-run DOT facility like the Turnpike, they have what they call equity provisions, which essentially mandates that those tolls stay local.
Can you help me get a better understanding, if I may, Mr. Chairman? In Georgia, you know, we do it as a state road. How much incremental dollars or percentage or whatever locally of the overall toll in Florida comes from those local authorities?
If you look at the table on page 18, and I'll back up to that.
Right. Yeah.
The dark blue at the bottom is the Turnpike.
Right.
Okay. So that's all DOT. Everything else is local.
Even the I-95 Express?
It's run by the DOT, but by law, the revenue has to be local.
So in essence, we're looking at somewhere in the 50 to 60% is probably state and the rest of it is local?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And in the future, it's really going to be more local. As you can see, that local piece is growing more rapidly than the state piece.
So would you say, and maybe similar to Georgia, as local communities in Georgia just understand that the state just doesn't simply have the resources, they're kind of taking it into their own hands and doing these things, and the legislature has provided the mechanisms for them to do that?
Absolutely. That's what happened in Florida. Yes, sir.
I know it's not Florida, but I read where Charlotte's doing some pretty innovative financing. Do you know anything about what Charlotte's doing? We compete with Charlotte.
Depends on which project. They're doing express lanes, which is basically a circumference around Charlotte, and that's being done by the DOT. They've also got some transit improvements they're doing locally, which are being done by the local groups.
Let me ask you a question, D. Florida have to have a balanced budget every
Yes.
year?
Yes.
So when you look at the differences, and you talked about on slide 28, the differences between us and them, do they use the accrual method? Is that how they, are they able to get by with the commitment for the cash flow, or?
Correct. In other words, say they start a project today for $10 million. In the first year, they may assume they're only going to spend $3 million of that. So they have to have the revenue for $3 million towards that project in that year. The next year, they assume they're going to spend $5 million. So they got to have $5 million towards it in the next year. Correct. It's based off that future revenue flow.
Yep. Go ahead, Ed.
Just want to make sure that I understand correctly. Is there any money, let's just talk about gas tax. Is there any money that is collected from gas taxes in Florida that goes to any other government service other than transportation? Local or state?
Other than what I would call sweeps or raids that were done to balance the budget, no. The local option gas tax by law has to be spent on transportation. The statewide gas tax by law has to be spent on transportation.
I can also ask a question about mass transit. How is mass transit being paid for in Florida in general?
It's a combination. The Florida revenues, that gas tax that you saw, the 20 cents, I'll call it, a minimum of 15% of that a year has to be spent on other than highways. Okay, it could be rail, ports, aviation, mass transit. Could be a combination of those. Generally, Florida has been spending more than 15% of that. It's been probably more like 20% on average. But that's of the state revenues coming into the Transportation Trust Fund. They've applied that to the motor vehicle fees as well. So that goes into those programs. And, you know, when you get into things like you're trying to do, you know, port improvements or those types of things, when you start adding it up, it adds up quicker than you think.
Okay. So a certain percentage of the transportation taxes by law have to go toward non-road projects.
Correct. And essentially, those are only capital improvements other than a small piece that goes to mass transit that's called a block grant. And that block grant is flexible. It can be on operating or capital. The block grant's about $200 million a year that's distributed to the transit entities. The rest of it, the local entities have to raise themselves or get it out of the federal government. And what the state has said to locals is, say the federal government wants to do a transit project with the locals, and the Fed said they'll fund 50%. The state has said we'll fund 50% of the non-federal share. And they've made that a commitment to the locals, and they've met it. So in essence, instead of the locals having to fund 50%, they're now having to fund 25%.
I assume you guys have faced the same problem that we've seen in Georgia in terms of reduction by the federal government in terms of its commitment to transit.
Yes.
Thank you.
You got a question? Yeah.
Senator Lucas. Did I understand you to say that new registrations, automobiles in Florida, they pay flat $200?
Correct.
Now, is that out of state, or is that new registrations period, whether it's in state or out of state?
It's both. If you add a vehicle to the fleet, okay, say in your family you have two vehicles and you have a kid turning 16,
Yeah.
and you buy a new car, you pay that fee. Okay? If you move to the state and you got North Carolina plates and you shift to Florida plates, you pay that fee.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. And I'll be available this afternoon, or I can come back if there are other questions.
Mayor Riker, you want to make an announcement before you leave?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Doug, got a little early, got a meeting to run up in Macon, but I understand many of you will be coming to Macon later this evening. We have a reception for you planned at the terminal station. Love to have all of you there. If you don't know how to get to the terminal station in Macon, go up 75 to I-16, second exit off of I-16 is Coliseum Drive. Turn right, go to the fourth light, that's Cherry Street, left, and you'll see the terminal station right there in front of you. 6:30, and then look forward to being with you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock at Mercer in the President's Dining Room.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
We thought it was at Cheddar's.
Cheddar's, yeah. Yeah. All right. Now that we've give Representative Peak a plug here, we will tell him that that'll cost him in the end. Mr. Hardy. Did you want to speak?
Well, yeah, I'll just say a couple words actually.
We actually have you down, so.
Okay. I know I'm in the right room.
Yeah, this is the police academy. I got that.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Let me take a minute. I'm Chris Hardy. I'm the president and CEO of the Albany Area Chamber of Commerce and the Albany Convention and Visitors Bureau. And I believe you had mentioned reference to some things that Charlotte were doing. Before I came here, I was well, actually 2 chambers ago. I was with the York County Regional Chamber in Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is just south of Charlotte. And when I got here back in May of 2012, we were just kind of wrapping up our public relations efforts on the T-SPLOST referendum. And so even though I didn't have the history of from the referendum starting here all the way through the time of the vote in July, they used my experience in going all the way back, which is something I'll talk about in a second, in my experience in dealing with penny-type sales taxes for transportation. When I was with the York County Regional Chamber of Commerce back from 2003 to 2008, we had, in 1999, the Chamber led an effort called Pennies for Progress, which was started in 1999, where we actually, and I was part of that, the cycle of the adding the ballots to the referendum throughout the time I was there. We actually had to go door knocking. And in South Carolina, if any local county wanted a particular referendum to appear on the ballot, you had to have at least 30% petition signatures of the entire citizen population within that county to get it added to the ballot. So we went door knocking, and out of a population of about 135,000, we got 30% of those signatures to support a 1% sales tax that could only be applied to roads and bridge improvements. We called it Pennies for Progress. Charlotte, as you mentioned, Charlotte is trying to accomplish something similar, although their state legislature allows something different than what South Carolina's legislature does. And it comes up for vote every 4 years. The first year in 1999 was it was a pretty close vote. I think it was like 55-45. But since then, because of the results that the citizens has seen since the original 1999 referendum, it's been anywhere between a 75 to 80-20 vote, in favor of. And it's simply based on, now there's other counties that are trying to do that and have been since that time. But my experience in seeing a lot of the improvements. And same thing that Albany and Dougherty County needs. About a lot of our projects from the T-SPLOST 2 years ago, we're still working on those, trying to privately fund them now within our own local community. But that's a, and I believe Mr. Cheney, I don't know where he went. He's over here. There he is. Or Mr. Clary, I'm sorry. He had made reference to other communities kind of taking upon themselves in Florida to do something similar, and I believe this is an example of what local communities does. And a lot of people ask me how that was done and how could maybe possibly our community in Dougherty County do something similar. And honestly, my answer at the time was I don't know, because I wasn't as familiar with the General Assembly requirements and legislature requirements to where a county could allow a particular local referendum on the general election ballot. So that was kind of our experience, and since then, just kind of give you an idea. Yeah, it means safety and road and bridge improvements, but for York County, it meant economic development. From the time that referendum passed in 1999, within a 5-year period from 1999, they saw 3 major economic development projects be approved and locate to South Carolina within York County that totaled anywhere between 300 to 3,500 jobs within 5 years from the referendum passing in 1999, simply because of that Pennies for Progress. Mack Truck was the largest. They relocated one of their major manufacturers simply because of that infrastructure improvements that they saw coming. That was part of the projects that they listed when the original referendum passed. So it's, whether it's an option or not, I don't know, but we have a lot of needs. We were not one of those that passed the T-SPLOST, unfortunately. We felt like that we could do a lot of things differently if we had an opportunity to do it again to be more successful. However, we weren't. But we still have needs right now just from the major projects list from T-SPLOST. We have about $55 million in major projects that the county is trying to get done somehow, some way, and we're still trying to work to those. And a lot of them have safety issues. 133, the Mayor Valdosta mentioned 133. 133 is a big artery for us, not just for the Marine Corps Logistics Base, for a lot of our major manufacturers, Procter & Gamble, M&M Mars, and Miller Coors. So that widening of 133 is a huge artery for us. It shows up on our legislative agenda every year, and it probably will until we get something done with that. So I appreciate y'all's time, and God bless.
Hold on. Anybody got any questions? He talked like a politician, didn't he? Quick. Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right. Now, we are back to the open mic portion of the meeting. And there again, I'm not going to call out all the individuals on this list because I know some of you just signed it. But at this point, is there anybody else that wishes to speak? I can't believe it. Roger, did you want to speak? We'd have to get you a step so we could see you behind the podium. I know that, but
Roger, don't take that.
I caught him playing handball out there by the curb a while ago. Y'all don't.
I'm Roger Dill. I am not a politician. I'm an engineer, and I've been in this business for about 56 years, I guess. And based on what I've heard today, the investment that we have in the state of Georgia is going downhill. Keith and the DOT are doing an excellent job trying to keep it afloat, but we've got to do something, and I know the T-Splash failed miserably, but I think, if everybody would get out and say the good things about what we have in transportation in Georgia, it would help us tremendously, because it's not enough said. We have the best we had the best roads. We had the best roads. We don't have the best roads now because we can't maintain them properly, and we can't put the money out there. And I know that Keith and all of the transportation people are fighting an uphill battle. And I think, this is a wonderful thing to do, that we go around and talk this thing and try to get it going, because we need a lot in Tift County. We need a lot in every county in Georgia. So I would suggest that we really keep trying to push this thing forward, and any way that we can help, we'll do it in Tift County. Thank you.
And I give him a hard time, but really and truly, Roger is one of the men in Tift County that keeps things moving when it comes to transportation. He can tell you probably about every single project that's going on over here and has gone on over here for the last 20 or 30 years. And I'm not going to say longer than that, but probably even a few years prior to that. But he is a workhorse over here. We kid him all the time. He's interim everything. Every time they need somebody to fill in, they call on him, and he steps up and does a good job. Anybody else wish to speak? Like we said, we're going to travel around the state. We're meeting in 8 different locations. We started out in Atlanta. Went to Columbus. Now we're in Tifton. We'll be in Macon tomorrow. Then we move on to Augusta, Savannah, end up in Blue Ridge and Rome. So we want anybody that has anything to say to speak now or forever hold their peace. Give them an opportunity to come and speak. Hold on one second. We're going to let her, and no, you come ahead. I'll get you that date in just a minute. No, you.
I am Chrissy Staley, and I'm with the Berrien County Chamber of Commerce and Development Authority. And I apologize for bringing my phone up, but it has my cheat notes on it. I had to contact our county administrator to get our budget details on roads. And I also want to commend you for the work that you're doing today and tell you some things that we, as a rural county in Berrien County, we are not on an interstate, but we do have several state highways that run through our community. One of the things that appealed to our elected officials during the whole T-SPLOST was the 25% money. We lose a tremendous amount of sales tax money to our neighbors. Every state highway that runs through our community leads to a Walmart, which is where everybody in my town thinks they need to go shop. So the 25% money was very attractive to our community. I know we all argued, and Jay, you were part of a lot of these meetings and haggling over the big projects that were taken off the top of our regional money. But the 25% money was very, very, very important to our communities and something that was easy to sell in our region. To give you an idea of the money that we have locally to spend, it's, and I do, Mayor, feel so sorry for you and your $20 million that you have in Lowndes County, but we have just over $1 million. And we have a 450 square mile county. And we've got school buses. 80% of our kids ride the bus to school. So I ask you, when you start formulating your new plan, to please put some thought into how it's going to impact rural Georgia. And a lot of the rural communities, the sales tax penny wouldn't necessarily be the best way to support it because we lose so much sales tax to the metro areas. So I just ask you to bear that in mind. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Again, I only know enough to be dangerous about what's spent in our community on roads, but I'll be happy to.
She did an outstanding job in helping us with the T-SPLOST, trying to go around.
Yes, we did help market T-SPLOST in the region. And one of the challenges I would say for that campaign is the campaign was greatly executed, but the materials I don't think translated to rural Georgia.
I agree. You're right on that. Population Berrien County, 15, 16?
The county is just over 19,000.
19.
Nashville is our county seat, and they are just under 5,000. And we also have Ray City, Alapahaw, and Enigma. And all of those towns, I think their incorporated limits are about 2.5 miles or less. Am I right, Randy?
But each one of them has a police officer and police chief, and you better be careful when you go through.
Yes, we do. We certainly do.
Not saying that I've gotten to meet any of them, but be careful. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for what you did during the campaign. She was a workhorse. November 19th, Blue Ridge. Any other comments? You got a question? Well, here.
It's for the committee, really, but more or less for the local government representatives that are here, ACCG and GMA. Where's Tom? Okay. You know, this is our third meeting. Every time we've gotten together, the discussion has evolved into how much money are we collecting locally, and then we talk about how much we're spending of that. Is there any way you guys can come up with some reports to bring to us? Not tomorrow, but our next get-together. I don't know where you can get it. I know all the counties and cities have their own CAFRs and their own reports and their own audits, but is there a general list somewhere that we could pull from, Department of Revenue or someone, see how much we've collected at the pumps, or, you know, for sales tax on fuel, and then how much are we spending on transportation? I know you can't do it for eSPLOST, but I'm just thinking if we could pull some numbers together, we can start looking at that, because that tends to be a reoccurring discussion in every one of these meetings.
And if you can't get those numbers, that says something.
Correct.
We can't get the numbers. I I know the DOT has estimates about the amount of local sales tax applied to motor fuel, what that generates. So we've got those numbers we can get from Keith. We at ACG, we're the only ones in the state that have done this, but we've gone to the Department of Revenue and we've gone through the paper files because this doesn't exist in electronic format. And we've gone through every single SPLOST referendum since back before 2004, and we have calculated how much of each SPLOST is dedicated to transportation. And I can tell you off the top of my head, it's close to 50% statewide. Now that's obviously varies greatly from county to county, city to city. But we can give you the exact amount of SPLOST dollars that have gone to transportation for every district. We have collected that data. We'd be glad to make that available to the county. Now, the other penny that is common amongst counties and cities, the local option sales tax, which is an operating revenue source. Obviously, that goes into our general fund. It's used to offset property taxes, but we can also tell you how much money is being spent from our general funds for the transportation department within each county. And I know a lot of the cities have their own transportation department, so that's a number we can quantify also, and we'd be glad to make that available to the county. And if there's anything else other than what I've already stated that you'd like to get, let me know. We can get that too.
Go up there. You got to be on the mic. Your counterpart was on the mic. You got to be on the mic.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Tom Gale with Georgia Municipal Association, and we'd be glad to try to work with you all to provide that information. But I think it is important to note that these local dollars, the SPLOST and LOST, have a variety of purposes that are decided locally by either the elected officials or by the voters. And the priorities of some communities may be 100% roads. Clint mentioned many of the SPLOSTs have been dedicated to transportation. And in other instances, like in Mayor Gale, my cousin Gale's city of Valdosta, their priorities currently are trying to build a new wastewater treatment plant or face millions and millions of dollars in fines from the EPA. They've got that flexibility now. If you continue to go down this road of discussing, or some of you continue to go down this road of discussing these shifts, it's going to have ripple effects, and I just want to make sure that you all understand that. It may mean that economic development priorities for one community, such as rebuilding a wastewater treatment plant, will potentially be impacted, which, as you know, would have negative economic consequences. So we'll be glad to work with you to try to find information about general fund expenditures on transportation and try to find out if the Department of Revenue can help us with city-by-city revenue figures for sales tax collected on gasoline. I have very serious concerns that the Department of Revenue will not be able to give us city-by-city data on revenue collected on gas.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
I want you to understand the point of my raising, and I don't know what other folks have, but the point of my raising. I'd like to see gas tax as much as possible be viewed by the citizenry as a user fee. And it's easier to sell adjustments in a user fee when they know that the money is going for a particular area. And I realize that anything that we do will have to be phased in over time, but that's basically, I'll tell you right now, that's basically where I'm coming from, is I'd like to see the gas tax simply be viewed as a user fee, because that way it's easier to go back to our citizenry and explain why we may have to adjust it in the future, just to let you know where I'm coming from.
And I will say that Mr. Gale and I have had some, when I say spirited, I mean in good fashion, some conversations about.
And I think there's an honest debate, Mr. Chairman. You and I have had a conversation or two about this, and I think that it's important for the committee to look at critical infrastructure that are state projects, state needs. Local officials, sure, we could use some more assistance, but I think that we have a variety of tools in our toolbox now. Help us make them as efficient as possible, but don't take them away from us. And what we can do to help this process, GMA would be more than willing to try to help with a statewide solution that can benefit all of Georgia. So,
of course.
Absolutely.
Do you think your members would be amenable to any money that they get off a loss or splash that part that's on motor fuel will go into transportation needs and not other projects?
Well, I think what I think you would have to figure out is how to explain, for instance, local option sales tax. How to explain to the people who own property in Macon-Bibb that if you were to make that portion of local option sales tax collected on gas go towards just transportation projects, you've got some questions there. But the first thing you do is you have to back out the property tax rollback that property owners are getting from local option sales tax. That's one of the main purposes, not the only purpose, but one of the main purposes of local option sales tax is you roll back property taxes and then you use it for general fund purposes, which in some cases, in most cases, includes transportation. So short answer to your question, you're talking, first of all, just on lost, property tax increase because that rollback goes away, property tax increase, and then, so you got to explain that to the voters. And then you've got to figure out how much of that money they're using for general fund goes to transportation purposes. It's sort of unraveling some yarn, so to speak, a ball of yarn. And I think
all of the taxes that you collect are not on motor fuel. I mean, Georgia is one of the few states that even allow local governments to even tax it. But at the same time, if you got a community like Macon, you got a sales tax base. Houston County, for instance, all of theirs goes to transportation. They were one of the reasons that they were in that region with Bibb that fought it and came out and fought it, because they'll tell you we take all of our SPLOST monies and local option sales tax money and we use it on our roads and bridges in the county. So what I'm asking is, how much would be lost? Because everything else is taxed when you pass a local option sales tax. I mean, we did a road tax in 1994 in Macon. That was dedicated to just roads and bridges. So what I'm asking you is, when we look at the things we're doing with the state, for instance, we used to provide y'all with LOP, Local Road Assistance Program. You got a city contract or a county contract, and you got money from DOT. Well, DOT doesn't have that kind of money around now, and I would suggest that the legislature, in its wisdom, and I was part of it during those days, we made some changes on how we funded DOT. So what I'm asking is, have y'all looked at it? Have you gauged your members and saying, look, that there might be some changes? We don't know what we're going to do. I mean, that's the reason we're going around the state now trying to gather information.
Well, I think what you're hearing from when you have these meetings across the state is that there is a great deal of need out there to fund projects, critical transportation infrastructure projects. And so the need is out there. I suggest that the state can focus on statewide priorities, whether it's the ports or whether it's congestion relief in Metro Atlanta or freight corridors. But I think from a Macon-Bibb County's perspective, you mentioned the folks south of you all in Houston County. They've decided transportation is a priority, and that's one of the reasons, one of the factors that led Houston County to vote against the Transportation Investment Act. And so I guess my point is, the local governments, in large part, have the tools in the toolbox. We could talk about making the TIA better. For instance, if a transportation region were to decide, the leadership in those regions were to decide that they could take another crack at it and pass another Transportation Investment Act referendum in their region, they get together and they say, we can do it. Well, the first thing they have to do is they have to go to the legislature to get a local bill from a delegation, and that's a big hurdle for legislators to have to make a decision to authorize a process to move forward in a region that had a miserable passage rate the first time around. Many things could change, but that's just one hurdle that keeps the local Transportation Investment Act process from moving forward. But that could be a recommendation of this committee. That's just one example.
The last one is,
the state gave up its mechanism to fund transportation when we allowed local communities to use it, especially e-laws, as a constitutional amendment. Now, the question comes, people around the state, the same folks in the community, are asking us, what are we doing about transportation needs and how are we going to fund these roads and these bridges? I just heard somebody talk about a bridge that the bus or the fire truck can't go over, these kind of things. I mean, so the community itself, the state community, is asking us to resolve some of these transportation needs, but at the same time, the community itself needs to understand that we gave away some of the authority to do what we do because we gave y'all the opportunity to use money on motor fuel that we don't get.
And I understand that point. I guess my suggestion is rather than try to take chunks of money from different pots of money that are collected from Berrien County to Lowndes County to Northwest Georgia, Walker County, I think it's probably more important for the state to figure out how to raise revenues for the state that also benefits local communities that can pay for those bridges to help Scott's, the chairman's fire truck get across it without having to go the long way. And I think that can be done through the great use of the commissioner's local maintenance improvement grant program. Our folks are very excited about that. The only complaint, especially, they're very excited about it, especially since they've done some reform to make it easier for projects to be delivered. The only complaint I hear is that they don't have enough of it. And that's an issue that needs a solution, I think, from this committee.
Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
I didn't hear anybody on this committee say they wanted to take money from local government and do it here. The chairman has said every single meeting, everything is on the table. You mentioned that the communities say there's not enough money, but yet you can't tell us how much money there is. That's all I want to know. I'm not trying to take any money from anybody. I'm wanting you to tell me how much of this money is being paid on motor fuel tax, how much of that is ultimately getting spent on local transportation. I think it's a very simple request, and I would say that a local government that cannot come up with that number, it gives me great pause. That's not the purpose of this, but I want to find out how much of that money is spent. You say you don't have enough, but yet you can't tell me how much it is. Just tell me how much it is, and then we'll put all that together in the overall part. And as far as your comments about we're supposed to be working on statewide transportation, that's right, but every local official that has testified before us every single day says we need more money. So we're not really doing a statewide transportation plan. We're doing a statewide transportation plan that also participates with the local communities. But I think this is one of the challenges that we've got to work through, is that automatically we're being very resistant of what we currently have. And I think we've said all along that we've got to look at this with brand new eyes. I mean, I personally think out of the 3 days of testimony that the testimony of Florida was the first real answer that when we've asked, many people have asked for it a number of times, tell us what other states are doing. Tell us what some other things are, and I was very pleased to see that we finally got some very concrete answers of some of the available processes out there. So I think overall it's been a very good meeting today.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I agree, and I think we are all in this together. And I would very much like to work with you to try to get that information. I think that that from our perspective, the city's perspective, we would like the Department of Revenue to be able to tell us how much revenue is collected on sales taxes in the city of Cumming and how much revenue of those sales taxes collected in Cumming is on gas.
If we need to bring the commissioner
if the Department of Revenue can tell us that,
we can do that.
We would be delighted. We would be delighted to know that information on a city-by-city basis. Right now, we can't provide that information because we don't have it. We can provide you other aggregate information and then city-by-city information about general fund revenues or the portion of SPLOSTs that they spend on transportation. But at this point, we can't segregate out our own sales tax revenue in total, let alone be able to segregate out the gas tax portion of that. So, but we'd be delighted to get if you can help us get a meeting with Commissioner McGinnity, and I'd love to do that. I really would.
Any other questions? Tom?
Thanks for putting me on the spot,
I was about
Mr.
to say,
Chairman.
we put you on a hot seat there.
Thank you.
Well, no, I think you can thank your counterpart. You had to jump up there, too. So, Kimberly, you smiling back there. You got anything you want to say? We're happy to have you in South Georgia. Any other comments?
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
In looking at this Florida presentation, I went back and pulled Commissioner Golden's presentation, and we are heavily dependent on federal funds. And it looks like I don't know if the legislature made the conscious decision or DOT to wean themselves off of federal funds when they're only getting 27% of their funding source from federal funds. Was it a conscious decision, or? Okay, just want to make that comment because it's glaring when you look at these two pie charts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other questions? How about our other legislators that are here? Or are they already gone? They already snuck out on us? Okay. Bubba, you got a question? Do you have a question? All right. With that being said, the committee members are headed on to Macon for another meeting tomorrow. We encourage you to come on up and join us. But remember, let everybody know that you talked to that we are going to be still in Augusta, Savannah, Blue Ridge, Rome. Family, thank you so much for your hospitality today and ABAC's hospitality. Y'all have been wonderful to us. Thank you so much for hosting. Thank you for the fried chicken. It was absolutely wonderful. Thank y'all for coming, and we're adjourned.
Do we keep these books?